What if I told you
that there once existed a ring, not of gold nor stone, but of living light, whispered to have opened the very gates of heaven? What if this ring was not forged by hands, but spoken into being by the breath of God himself? They called it the crystal ring of Enoch, the key that turned in the lock between worlds. It shimmered between matter and spirit, humming with the voices of the watchers, angels who once walked among men. And those who saw it said it carried the memory of the dawn, when heaven still touched the earth. But time buried its name, and memory became silence. We forgot the covenant that bound light to flesh, heaven to clay. Yet deep within the bones of your soul, something still remembers. The ache for what was lost, the longing for the sound of divine doors opening once more. Stay until the end, and you will hear that sound again. The soft turning of the key Enoch carried into the clouds. If your heart stirs when you hear the wind whisper ancient names, stay with us. If your soul remembers the light, do not turn away. Subscribe, and walk this ancient path once more, as we remember together the story heaven tried to erase. Before the flood, before the sorrow, before the first tear of heaven fell into the soil, there was light. Not sunlight, nor firelight, but a gentler brilliance, a kind of breathing radiance that moved like water through the air. The world was still unspoken then, half-formed between dream and command, and in that tender silence the voice hovered, the voice that spoke worlds into being. When the voice breathed upon the waters, the light took form, not as flame, nor as star, but as something purer, round as eternity, clear as forgiveness. It was the first ring, the ring of light that had no beginning and no end. And though it was not yet Enoch's to bear, heaven already knew whose hand it would one day rest upon. The angels looked upon it and trembled, for they saw in its circle the image of what they had lost: unity, unbrokenness, peace. Some called it the eye of the dawn, others the crown of silence. But the voice called it Zohariel, meaning the light that remembers. It was said that within its crystal depths dwelled the echo of the first word ever spoken, the syllable that birthed creation. When the world awakened from its stillness, the garden rose like a thought blooming from the mind of God. Rivers whispered over stones of gold, and the winds moved as if carrying messages from a place just beyond sight. And in the midst of that garden walked one whose heart was still unshadowed. Enoch, the listener, the one who remembered the silence before the noise. He was not born knowing the ring. He was born knowing the ache, the quiet yearning of every soul that had once heard the voice and longed to hear it again. Each night he would lift his face to the firmament, where the stars pulsed like the breathing of the eternal, and he would whisper, "I remember."
and the heavens would answer in light.
One night, when the winds stood still and the earth held its breath, a light descended, not in fire or thunder, but in a drift of soft brilliance. It came upon Enoch as dew falls upon grass, settling in his open palms, and there, trembling like a living tear, was the crystal ring. He did not see gold or jewels.
He saw himself, reflected, multiplied, dissolved.
Within the ring's perfect circle he saw his own eyes as twin stars gazing back.
And in that reflection he heard a sound.
Not a voice, but a vibration, low and endless, as if the world itself was humming the memory of its beginning. He knew then that he was not chosen for power, but remembrance. The ring was not a gift. It was a burden of memory, a covenant to recall what others would forget, that all light longs to return home. And as he lifted the crystal to the sky, the stars seemed to bow, and the trees bent toward him, and the wind sighed his name. Enoch, son of breath, keeper of the dawn. The night deepened, yet it was not dark. Every shadow held light now, every silence held music. He could see the pulse of the unseen, the thin threads that connected all things, from the dust beneath his feet to the distant lights above. The world had always been bound together, but only now did he perceive the ring that encircled it all. In that moment he understood what the angels had forgotten. That creation itself was the first covenant, the first circle, and the ring he held was but its reflection, a reminder that all beginnings are bound to their ends, and all ends return to light. He wept, though he did not know why. The tears were not sorrow, but recognition, the soul remembering itself. For somewhere deep within his chest, something old and infinite stirred, the same breath that once hovered above the waters. And when Enoch placed the ring upon his hand, the world shuddered. The mountains inhaled, the rivers brightened. The wind whispered through the trees in a tongue older than time. Creation had recognized its listener. That night, heaven leaned close. The voice spoke not in thunder, but in gentleness. What you hold is not mine alone. It is the memory of all things. Keep it until the light returns to itself. And so began the story of the crystal ring. Not as an artifact of power, but as the echo of unity. The gate and the key bound as one. The stars dimmed as dawn approached, and Enoch closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of the crystal fading into his pulse. He did not know that the same light which touched him would one day open the gates of heaven, nor that its memory would survive flood and fire carved in the hearts of those who still remember the first light. The first morning came gently, like forgiveness, and, in its glow, Enoch walked again among the living, carrying in silence the secret that the world was made of circles, and that every circle was trying to find its center once more. Days became seasons, and seasons flowed like breath through the veins of the world. Enoch walked the lands of the first dawn, where rivers shone with living silver, and mountains whispered hymns of memory. The ring pulsed upon his hand, cool as moonlight, warm as thought. Sometimes he felt it hum in rhythm with his own heartbeat, as if heaven itself were breathing through him. He began to notice the language of all things. The stones sang softly beneath his feet. The trees bent their leaves not from wind, but from recognition. Even the smallest grain of sand seemed to glow faintly, aware of its place in the divine pattern. The ring had opened his sight, not outward, but inward. It was as though he could now see through the eyes of creation itself. One twilight, when the air shimmered between day and night, a shadow descended upon the horizon. Not darkness, but a kind of heavy silence. The air grew still and the animals fled. The ring grew cold. From the silence emerged a form of light, clothed in sorrow, an angel, neither fallen nor whole. His name was Remiel, keeper of memory, a watcher of the boundaries between worlds. "Enoch," he said, voice like the sound of wind through hollow stone. "The ring you bear remembers the covenant that even we have forgotten. It was made not to rule, but to remind. It is the circle that binds heaven to earth, but the bond grows thin." Enoch fell to his knees. "Why me?" he whispered. "Why give such a thing to dust?" Remiel's gaze shimmered like morning stars. "Because dust remembers what light forgets. The proud cannot carry what must be bowed to love. The heavens need humility to remember their reflection." As he spoke, a sound like distant thunder rolled across the firmament. The angel lifted his eyes, and grief shadowed his face. "The watchers stir," he said. "They look upon the daughters of men and burn with envy. The covenant trembles. You must listen to the wind, Enoch, for soon it will speak in voices of flame." Then, as swiftly as dawn consumes shadow, Remiel vanished, leaving behind only the faint scent of rain on stone. That night, Enoch could not sleep. The ring throbbed with strange fire, flickering between light and shadow. He wandered to the edge of the great plain, where stars gathered in a river above, mirroring the one below. Kneeling, he placed his hand and the ring upon the water's surface. Ripples of light danced outward, forming patterns too intricate to name.
Visions came, flashes of what was and what would be.
He saw towers of glass rising from the dust, cities of fire where men forgot to look upward. He saw angels bound in flame, crying out for forgiveness. He saw floods that would wash the world clean, and after them, new dawns born from sorrow. But through it all, one sound endured, the low hum of the ring, steady as breath, patient as grace. He awoke at sunrise, his body trembling, his eyes filled with tears he did not recall shedding. The ring was no longer merely upon his finger. It was within his pulse. It moved with him, became him.
And in that
realization, he understood what Remiel had meant. The key was not metal nor stone, but remembrance itself. From that day forward, Enoch began to write. Not upon parchment, for there was none, but upon air. He spoke words that carried light, syllables that trembled with divine echo. Each breath became a verse, each heartbeat a scripture. And the ring glowed brighter, as if it rejoiced at being remembered. Yet even as the light grew within him, the shadows around the world deepened. The watchers had begun their descent, the first cracks forming in the bridge between realms. Men, once content to walk beneath heaven's gaze, now yearned for more. They sought to seize the light rather than receive it. And the ring, which had once sung softly, began to weep. One evening, Enoch climbed the hill where the stars hung nearest to the earth. He raised his hand, and the ring shone like a captured dawn. "If I am to keep this covenant," he whispered to the unseen heavens, "let me remember, even when the world forgets." The sky answered, not in words, but in a slow, warm rain that shimmered like tears of glass. The drops fell through the light of the ring, refracting into 1,000 tiny rainbows, each one a promise. In their reflection, he saw not his face, but countless faces, generations yet unborn, all carrying fragments of the same light within them. He understood then the crystal ring was not meant to belong to one hand. It was the inheritance of all creation, the circle of remembrance that would one day call heaven home again. And so he bowed his head and let the rain baptize him in light. The ring's hum softened, merging with the sound of his heartbeat, the rhythm of the earth, the eternal breath that binds all things. He did not know it yet, but the winds were already gathering, the 7 winds that would test the ring and the heart of the one who bore it. And the world, though still bright, was beginning to tremble. The days that followed were neither bright nor dark. They were vast. The air itself felt as if it were holding its breath, listening. Every tree, every stone, every grain of sand seemed to wait for something they could not name. Even the animals moved more softly, as though aware that creation stood upon the edge of remembrance. Enoch walked among them in quiet awe. The ring, though small, seemed to carry the weight of a world. At times, he felt it whisper in his dreams, not in words, but in images made of light. He saw circles within circles, galaxies spinning like unseen wheels, all turning toward a center that shone like the heart of God. And from that center came a whisper, "All things return." Each morning, Enoch rose before the dawn. He would climb the hill of first light and watch as the stars faded into the breath of the coming day. He had begun to feel the rhythm of the world, not as time, but as heartbeat. The ring pulsed with that same rhythm, glowing faintly with the first rays of the sun. Sometimes, in the half-light, he could see faint inscriptions upon its surface, letters of fire that vanished when he tried to read them, as if the truth itself must remain half-hidden. He spoke to no one of his visions. To the people who lived in the valleys below, Enoch was a quiet man, a keeper of strange peace. They saw in him something they could not explain, the calm of one who has seen heaven's threshold and returned. When they asked of the ring, he smiled and said, "It remembers what we have forgotten." But within his heart a stirring had begun, a question that would not rest. What was the ring waiting for? Why had heaven entrusted something so vast to a man of dust and breath? The answer came in the wind. One night, as the moon rose pale and distant, the 7 winds gathered. They did not come in storm or thunder, but in silence, each carrying a voice, each bearing a memory. The first wind smelled of the dawn. It spoke of beginnings. The second of rivers, carrying the murmurs of the deep. The third came with the scent of fire and sorrow, whispering of stars that had fallen. The others followed, weaving through the night like unseen messengers, until they circled Enoch where he stood upon the plain. The ring on his hand flared to life. A pillar of light rose around him, and within that light he saw visions, the face of the Creator, veiled in radiance, the angels radiant yet restless, the first covenant written in the dust of creation. The wind spoke as one. Child of earth, remember, for soon the heavens will forget. Their words trembled through his bones. Why will they forget? He asked, his voice trembling. Because love and pride cannot dwell in one heart, they replied. The watchers, born of light, envy the warmth given to clay. They seek to teach mankind the fire of heaven, though man's vessel was made for gentler things. The covenant will break, and when it does, the flood will come, a cleansing for memory. Enoch bowed his head, tears glimmering in the light. Then what is my part in this? To remember when all else is washed away, said the wind, to carry the seed of light through the darkness. You are not chosen to rule, but to recall. And then, just as they had come, the winds dispersed, 7 breaths returning to the corners of creation. The night grew still once more, save for the faint hum of the ring and the slow rhythm of Enoch's breath. He sank to his knees. His tears fell onto the soil, and where they touched, tiny flowers of pale light bloomed, glowing for a moment before fading into the earth. They were like memories, brief but eternal in meaning. For the first time, Enoch felt the weight of eternity not as wonder, but as burden. He was not called to change the world, but to remember it, to bear witness to the slow unfolding of divine sorrow, to hold in his heart the reflection of a love too vast to contain. When dawn came, he rose. The valley below shimmered in gold mist, and far off the voices of children rose like soft music. He smiled faintly, knowing they too were part of the circle, unaware yet that every breath they took was written in the same divine pattern he now carried in his hand. He looked to the sky. The light was beautiful, but it carried a strange edge, a hint of coming distance, as though heaven itself was slowly retreating. The angels above watched, silent, uncertain.
Even they could feel the trembling of the covenant.
And Enoch, the listener, stood alone upon the hill, one man between 2 worlds, one soul holding the memory of what was once whole. The ring shimmered faintly, as if weeping for what it already knew. He whispered to the dawn, "If the heavens forget us, may the earth remember." The wind answered in silence, and so ended the age of pure light, the last calm before the fall. The next dawn would bring the first echo of thunder, the beginning of the 7 winds trial, and the first shadow cast upon heaven's perfect circle. But for now, the light still lingered, soft, eternal, unwilling to fade. And Enoch walked back into the morning mist, his hand glowing with a light that was not his own. Before the storms came, there was a sound. Not thunder, not rain, but breath. It moved across the face of the earth like a whisper, searching for its name. The people of those early days did not know it, but Enoch did. He heard the winds long before they were seen, the way a heart hears its own echo across a lifetime. Each of the 7 winds had a memory, a story born before the flood. They were not tempests or hurricanes, but living spirits, remnants of the breath that shaped creation. And when they moved, the air itself remembered how to sing. The first wind came from the east, gentle and golden. It carried the scent of gardens and the laughter of the first dawn. When it passed over Enoch's face, he felt a warmth that was not of the sun. It whispered, "I am the beginning that never ends." The second came from the south, heavy with mist. It spoke in murmurs like rivers beneath the world, and its words were filled with patience. It said, "I remember the foundations, the bones of mountains, the stillness before song." The third came wild from the west, bright and cold, stirring even the stars. It crackled with the remnant of fire, the echo of those who fell. "I am the keeper of the watcher's sighs," it said, its voice trembling with sorrow. And Enoch, standing between them, felt the air around him turn to light. He fell to his knees as the remaining winds arrived. The fourth from the north, the fifth from the deep, the sixth from the heights, and the seventh from within. They circled him in silence, forming a column of motion so still it seemed carved from eternity. The crystal ring upon his hand began to glow again, pure and alive, each beam bending toward a different wind. He felt them harmonize, 7 voices, 1 song. The air thrummed with living memory, and for a moment the veil between heaven and earth grew thin. He could see the strands of creation, the luminous threads that bound the stars to rivers, the rivers to roots, the roots to breath. Every wind touched them gently, and the whole world shimmered with awareness. "Why have you come to me?" Enoch asked softly. "What am I to you?" The 7th wind, the one from within, answered, its voice so quiet it seemed to speak from inside his chest. "Because you remember."
You are the echo that still listens, and one who listens may yet turn the key.
Enoch looked at the ring. "The key?"
The key is remembrance, said the wind.
But remembrance must be tested. The 7 winds are not gifts, they are trials. Each one will teach you what heaven forgot. As the words were spoken, the air darkened. The circle of light broke, and the first test began. A storm rose, though no clouds gathered. It came from nowhere and everywhere, a trembling in the bones of the world. The first wind, once golden, turned pale and fierce, tearing through the trees with the sound of wings breaking. Enoch stood firm as the ring blazed brighter, anchoring him in its light. "What are you showing me?" he cried above the roar. The voice of the first wind replied, "I am the beginning, Saya, and all beginnings must end." In that instant visions filled his eyes. He saw the birth of worlds and the fading of stars. He saw children born and graves dug by their descendants. He saw time itself bend, turning the eternal into dust. He fell to the ground, clutching the earth as tears streamed down his face.
Why show me this sorrow?
The wind quieted, soft again. So you will not worship the dawn without remembering the dusk. Light without shadow forgets where it came from. As the storm passed, the trees stilled. The ground was damp with dew, and the ring flickered once, then calmed. Enoch's breathing slowed. The lesson had settled within him like a seed beneath soil. He rose slowly, his hands trembling. "If even the beginning must end," he whispered, "then what endures?" And from the farthest horizon the second wind stirred, carrying its answer through the night. It came cool and fragrant, heavy with the sound of waters. The rivers glowed faintly in its presence, and Enoch felt the pull of deep remembrance. Not of stars this time, but of the hidden places beneath them. He closed his eyes. "Then teach me, second wind. Show me what lies beneath all endings." The wind encircled him gently, folding him in its cool breath. The earth beneath his feet seemed to melt away, and he was falling, not downward, but inward, into the memory of the world's own heart. He saw caverns of living crystal beneath the mountains, glowing with ancient fire. He heard the heartbeat of the deep, slow and patient as the turning of heaven itself. The voice of the second wind spoke, steady as the tide. Do not fear what sleeps beneath you. The darkness you dread is the womb of light.
Even the flood that comes will not destroy what remembers.
The waters are not death, they are renewal. Enoch's tears fell silently. He understood, though words could not hold it. The ring upon his hand pulsed once more, echoing the rhythm of that deep, eternal heartbeat. He was beginning to see the winds were not merely elements, but memories, and each memory was a fragment of the same truth, that light and darkness, birth and death, ascent and fall, all were parts of one eternal circle. The same circle he now carried upon his hand. The second wind faded into stillness, leaving behind a hush that seemed alive. Enoch opened his eyes to the dim shimmer of dawn rising across the plain. The air was heavy with the perfume of wet earth and new beginnings. His heart felt quieter now, yet vast, as if it had been stretched to fit the rhythm of the deep. He looked to the sky. The light had changed. It was softer, more ancient, carrying a pulse he had never noticed before, the breath of creation itself. The ring glowed faintly, and when he raised it toward the rising sun, he saw through the beam that all things were bound by invisible circles of wind. Each breath of air, each drifting cloud, each sigh of the world was part of a single conversation between heaven and earth. And then came the third wind. It did not arrive gently. It struck like the memory of fire, bright, restless, filled with the scent of ash and longing. The trees bent, not from force, but from recognition. The very sky seemed to mourn.
Enoch stood in the midst of it, his robes fluttering, his eyes filled with the reflection of flames that were not yet burning.
The wind spoke in broken chords, trembling between lament and rage. "I am the sigh of the fallen," it said. "I am what remains when purity is touched by pride."
Enoch felt his body weaken beneath its voice.
The air around him thickened, and shadows began to form in the light. Outlines of beings once radiant, now dimmed. They were the Watchers, angels who had gazed too long upon the beauty of earth and forgotten their place. Their eyes burned with sorrow. Their wings, though luminous, carried the dust of descent. They looked upon Enoch as one might look upon a mirror, half in envy, half in memory. One stepped forward, his voice trembling with the weight of what had been lost. "We taught the children of earth to shape metal and stone. We gave them the secrets of the star. And now they build towers to reach what they cannot touch." Enoch's heart ached. "Why did you fall?" he whispered. The Watcher lowered his head. "Because love became hunger. We mistook reflection for source. And now we wander the edges of light, unable to return." The third wind howled, swirling around them like the wings of grief. The ring upon Enoch's hand burned, its crystal flickering with painful brightness. He saw visions of vast cities of light collapsing into dust, of angels weeping over altars they had built for themselves. The wind's voice thundered, "Learn, Enoch! Even light can forget its origin when it seeks to become the sun. You are the keeper of remembrance. Remember this." He fell to his knees, pressing his hand to the ground. The earth beneath him was warm, not with fire, but with sorrow. He could feel the pain of the fallen coursing through it, the ache of separation. When the wind at last softened, only silence remained. A silence so deep it seemed to listen. And then from that stillness a new sound rose, faint at first, then growing. The song of the fourth wind. It came from the north, cool and measured, carrying the scent of snow and stars. It moved like thought, deliberate, calm, precise. Where the third wind had burned, the fourth healed. Where sorrow had screamed, this one whispered peace. Enoch lifted his eyes. Above him, the stars did not fade with daylight. They remained visible, gleaming softly in the blue. He heard their hum, faint but steady, like the sound of 1,000 hearts beating in harmony. "I am memory's keeper," said the fourth wind. "I am the balance of the heavens. I turn what was lost into order, what was broken into meaning. It moved through him, wrapping him in clarity. For the first time, Enoch saw the pattern in the chaos, the divine architecture behind pain. Every sorrow he had witnessed was a note in the same song, every fall a descent toward deeper understanding. The ring blazed again, but this time its light was clear, no longer blinding. He looked within its glow and saw the reflection of the winds themselves, each one forming a circle around his heart. He whispered, "Then the watchers too are part of the song?" "Yes," said the fourth wind. "Even their fall carries wisdom, but the song must remember the silence it came from. Do not forget." And as the wind faded, Enoch realized that remembrance was not merely thought, it was love. To remember is to hold even the fallen in compassion. He wept again, though this time his tears fell with peace. The day turned to twilight. The first stars appeared, and the ring pulsed softly, echoing their rhythm. He could feel that 3 winds still waited, 3 lessons still hidden in the breath of the world. He rose and turned toward the horizon, where the mountains stood like ancient listeners. The air shimmered faintly, and he heard, far off, the rumble of the 5th wind, stirring beneath the surface of the earth like the heartbeat of something vast and dreaming. Enoch closed his eyes and whispered, "I am listening." The world exhaled in reply, and the next lesson began. The 5th wind did not come from sky or sea. It rose from beneath, from the deep roots of the world where time itself sleeps. The ground beneath Enoch's feet trembled as though it were remembering something long forgotten. Stones shifted softly, rivers stilled. Even the air seemed to bow. It was not a storm, it was a remembrance, the earth's own breath returning to itself. The wind carried no scent, no sound. Yet when it touched him, Enoch felt 1,000 lifetimes pass through his bones. He saw the rise of mountains, the opening of valleys, the slow carving of the world by the patient hand of God. And then a voice spoke, not around him, but within, deep, ancient, resonant. "I am the 5th wind, the memory of endurance.
I am the patience beneath all creation."
Enoch fell to his knees, his palms pressed into the soil. He felt its quiet heartbeat pulsing through him, steady and low, like a great creature asleep beneath eternity.
"Tell me what I must learn," he whispered.
The earth answered through the wind, its tone both tender and immense. "You must learn to be still." The words seemed simple, yet, as they entered his heart, they cracked open vast meanings. Stillness, not the absence of movement, but the perfect harmony of motion within purpose. Stillness, where nothing strives because all things already belong. The wind deepened.
Visions unfolded before his inner sight. Roots moving like rivers of light, carrying messages between trees and stones, between oceans and clouds.
He saw that even the soil remembered, that every grain of dust was once starlight, fallen and content to rest. "You rush toward heaven," said the voice, "but heaven does not run. You seek revelation as if it were hidden, yet revelation is the silence between breaths."
Enoch's tears fell onto the earth, and the ground seemed to drink them as offering.
"Then all that lives
"Already knows?"
"Yes," the wind replied, "but they have forgotten their knowing. That is why you listen and to remind them." The ring upon his hand grew warm, not in fire but in calm.
Its light no longer dazzled.
It soothed. For the first time, Enoch felt no desire to ascend, no hunger for secrets. He simply was, one with the breath, the soil, the wind that moved through all. The 5th wind subsided, leaving behind an echo of peace so vast it felt like eternity itself had paused to rest. And into that peace stepped the 6th wind. It did not walk, nor rush, nor whisper. It descended, soft as a prayer. Enoch lifted his gaze, and the sky unfurled like a scroll of light. The 6th wind came from above, from the heights where sound itself begins. It shimmered in colors unseen, folding the firmament into layers of radiance. I am the sixth wind, it said, the voice of ascension. I carry the longing of creation to return. Its touch was weightless. Yet when it passed through him, Enoch felt as though his very spirit were being lifted upward. He saw the heavens opening in veils, each more translucent than the last, until he glimpsed the pure brightness that no eyes may endure. His body trembled, not from fear, but recognition.
This is home, he breathed.
Yes, the wind replied, but not yet, for ascent without remembrance is exile disguised as glory. The word struck deep. Enoch understood then why the watchers had fallen. They had reached upward without first bowing downward. They had sought heaven without loving the earth. The sixth wind wrapped around him, weaving ribbons of light through his hair, whispering truths too gentle for language. Before you rise, it said, you must learn the seventh. And as it spoke, the light dimmed, and all winds fell silent. The world held its breath. The seventh wind came not from any direction, nor from earth or sky. It came from within Enoch himself. He did not hear it with his ears, but felt it as the echo of his own breath, a whisper so intimate it could only be the voice of the soul. I am the wind you carry, it said, the memory that remembers you. Enoch pressed a trembling hand to his chest. His heart glowed softly beneath his ribs. The ring upon his hand answered with the same light, as though the two were reflections of each other. He realized in that still moment that all the winds had never been separate. The first that spoke of beginnings, the second that revealed the deep, the third that burned with sorrow, the fourth that balanced, the fifth that endured, the sixth that ascended, all had been voices of the same breath. The divine breath, the breath that still moved through him. And when that realization dawned, the seven winds gathered once more, encircling him like a crown of living air. They sang, a low, endless tone that vibrated through the bones of the world. The trees shimmered, the rivers glowed, even the stones seemed to hum. For a brief and sacred instant, heaven and earth inhaled together. The voice of all seven spoke as one. You have heard the secret of remembrance. The winds are not apart from you. You are their vessel, and they move as you breathe. Enoch's eyes overflowed.
Then I am part of the covenant?
You are its memory, said the voice. You are the ring made flesh. He looked down. The crystal ring no longer shone apart from him. Its light had entered his hand, sinking into his skin. It had become his pulse. He stood in silence, bathed in dawn. Around him, the winds faded into stillness once more, their song lingering in the trembling air. But within him, their breath remained, eternal, patient, alive. He finally understood. To remember was not merely to recall the past, but to awaken the living present, the breath that connects the dust of earth to the fire of heaven. The covenant was not written in stone or star, but in breath, and Enoch carried it with every inhalation. When the last echo faded, the sky grew clear. The birds began to sing again, unaware that the winds had changed them too. The rivers resumed their laughter, and the world continued. But now something new shimmered quietly beneath the surface. Awareness. Enoch turned his face toward the rising sun. He was no longer merely a man who listened. He was a keeper of the winds, a living circle through which heaven remembered its own reflection. He walked down the hill in silence, his hand resting over his heart, where the ring now lived unseen. The air followed him like a friend, whispering softly through the grass. The key has awakened, and as the morning light spread across the valleys, it seemed the whole world took a breath. Slow, deep, eternal. There came a night when the air itself trembled with the sound of wings. The stars seemed restless, as if stirred by remembrance. It was then that Enoch first saw the descent of those who had once been keepers of heaven's flame. The watchers. They did not fall in fire, as men later told. They fell in silence, like embers slipping from a dying sun. Each carried the memory of light, though dimmed by longing. The sky shuddered as their forms took shape upon the mountains, their radiance veiled beneath garments of shadow. The world was not ready to behold sorrow in such beauty.
Enoch watched from the high plain, his heart heavy yet calm.
The winds around him whispered warning, their voices soft as distant bells. "They come bearing what is forbidden," they said. "Light unbound from obedience, flame without anchor." And indeed, when the watchers walked among men, their steps awakened ancient fires. They taught secrets not meant for haste, the cutting of stone, the shaping of metal, the mixing of colors into glass and weapon. But worst of all, they taught the vanity of mirrors. Humanity, once content to reflect heaven, began instead to crave its own reflection. Enoch wandered among them unseen, a listener, as always. He saw their faces, tall, luminous beings who wept even as they gave. Among them was Sariel, once of the inner chorus, whose eyes still carried the tenderness of the dawn. It was Sariel who first spoke to Enoch. "You walk with their breath," said the angel, his voice a broken hymn. "The winds cling to you as to the altar of remembrance."
Tell me, does heaven still whisper? Enoch bowed his head. It does.
But the whisper grows faint. Sariel turned his gaze toward the stars, his light dimming.
Then soon the silence will reign.
We sought to bring heaven closer, to give what was withheld. Yet in our giving we unbound what was meant to remain sung, not seen. The air shimmered between them. The ring within Enoch's hand glowed faintly, as if stirred by grief. "You knew it would cost you everything," Enoch whispered. Sariel smiled, though sorrow softened his light. "Yes, for love is dangerous when it forgets its source." He knelt before Enoch, wings folded close. "The ring you carry, it was never meant to rule. It is remembrance itself. Keep it hidden, for soon the heavens will shut their doors, and the world will drown in the echo of our fall." Then Sariel touched the earth with trembling hands, and where his fingers met the soil, light bled like wine into the roots. The trees began to glow from within, not bright, but mournful. "We will be chained to our choices," he said, "but perhaps one will remember. Perhaps one will forgive." Enoch's tears fell freely. "I will remember," he vowed, "even when all else is washed away." The wind stirred softly around them, bearing witness to the promise. But the others did not hear. The watchers spread across the land, their beauty dazzling, their gift swift. Humanity's heart swelled with wonder, but not reverence. They built temples not for God, but for the stars. They spoke the names of the angels in vain, believing they had become their equals, and the light that once healed began to burn. The crystal ring trembled upon Enoch's hand, as if mourning creation's confusion. The air thickened with dissonance, a music too bright, too fast, like the fever of a dreamer lost in light. Each night Enoch climbed the mountain to watch the heavens. He prayed for guidance, but only silence answered. Deep, endless silence, the kind that precedes storms. Until one night, when thunder rolled not from clouds, but from heaven's heart. The sky cracked. Light rained downward in shards of sound. The ground quaked, rivers recoiled, and the winds screamed in anguish. The watchers lifted their faces toward the storm they had awakened, and in that light Enoch saw, for a heartbeat, the sorrow of God. It was not wrath, it was grief. He fell to his knees, covering his face as a voice older than creation filled the air. The light that forgets its order must return to silence. The fire that burns without remembrance must be quenched. And just as quickly the storms ceased. The stars flickered once, then dimmed. The air lay heavy, trembling with aftermath. When Enoch lifted his eyes, he saw Sariel again. His form now dimmed, his wings no longer radiant, but folded in shadow.
"It is done," he whispered. "Heaven has withdrawn its breath."
We remain, not fallen to darkness, but to memory. Enoch rose, his face pale with sorrow. Then what of man? Sariel's gaze drifted toward the valleys below, where fires still glimmered in human dwelling. They will dream of light, and in their dreaming they will forget it was ever real. He looked at Enoch one final time. Remember us kindly. Then he vanished, dissolved into wind and dust.
Enoch stood alone upon the trembling earth, the ring cold upon his hand.
He felt the weight of remembrance settle upon him fully now, not as honor, but as burden. He understood that to carry light is to bear its sorrow, to remember that even the purest flame can cast shadow. He turned toward the horizon where the dawn struggled to rise, whispering softly to the silence that remained. Even in the fall there is still light. And the wind, faint but faithful, answered, "Then let it be remembered." For many nights after, Enoch could not sleep. The earth felt different beneath his feet, heavier, quieter, as though it were mourning the sound of heaven's song. The stars no longer sang as they once did. They flickered with the tremor of withheld light. The watchers, once radiant, now wandered like mourners among their own creations, their faces half shadow, their eyes full of regret. He walked through their cities, places carved from mountain glass and rivers of molten gold.
Music filled the air, sweet but restless.
Fires burned in the centers of their halls, yet gave no warmth. Everywhere he turned, he saw beauty unanchored, wisdom untethered from remembrance. The gifts of heaven had become the seeds of ruin. The crystal ring pulsed faintly beneath his robe, responding to the imbalance in the air. Its light flickered like a heartbeat fading in a dying world. He understood that it was not only a key, it was a living witness, feeling the ache of separation between realms. Each pulse was a whisper. The covenant trembles. One night, while Enoch walked among the quiet hills beyond the cities, he felt a chill descend upon him, not of cold, but of distance. He looked upward and saw a figure upon the wind, bright and terrible. It was Azazel, the first among the watchers to forget compassion. His light was still dazzling, but it cut rather than healed.
Azazel descended, his voice the echo of thunder trapped in a human tongue.
"Man was made to crawl," he said, "yet we have given him wings. Why should light remain chained to silence?" Enoch's voice was calm but steady. "Because the silence is holy. Without it, light forgets what it is." Azazel smiled, though his eyes did not. "You speak of holiness, listener, yet you wear the covenant that denies freedom. Look around you. These mortals build, create, desire. They are becoming gods, and heaven fears them." Enoch took a slow breath. The winds stirred faintly behind him, whispering his name as if in warning.
"Heaven does not fear," he said softly. "Heaven remembers."
"It is the forgetting that destroys."
Azazel stepped closer, and the air around them burned faintly with invisible flame.
"And remember this," he said. "Every light that is bound seeks to break its chain."
"Even angels."
And before Enoch could speak again, Azazel turned, his form splitting into 1,000 fragments of light that scattered across the horizon like shards of a shattered dawn. Where they fell, the earth smoked. Enoch watched in silence. The crystal ring glowed briefly in sorrow, then dimmed again. He knew what was coming. Pride given form, desire given voice. The balance had broken. He wandered for days afterward, seeking a place untouched by the Watcher's influence. But even the winds carried traces of their rebellion. The air hummed with strange frequencies. The soil pulsed with new metals that glimmered unnaturally under moonlight. Humanity was learning to forge the secrets of star. Yet each spark carried within it the seed of corruption. One evening, as the sun drowned itself in the red horizon, Enoch knelt beside a river. The waters no longer reflected the sky. They shimmered with dust like molten glass. He dipped his hand into the current, and the ring shone beneath the surface, casting ripples of clear light across the muddy depths. "Father of winds," he whispered, "the covenant is breaking. The flame forgets the silence.
Tell me, what can be saved?
The river stilled.
A low hum began to rise, not from the air, but from the water itself.
It was the fifth wind, the voice of the deep, speaking through the current. Not all can be saved, it said gently. But what remembers will rise again. The flood will come, not to destroy, but to renew. And when the waters recede, memory shall plant its seed once more. Enoch bowed his head. Then must I speak of what I have seen? Yes, answered the water. For silence, too, can be a sin when the world forgets its source.
Speak not to warn, but to remind.
And so beneath the dimming stars, Enoch began to write. Not with ink or quill, but with breath. His words rose like mist from his lips, weaving themselves into the air. The winds caught them, carrying them across valleys into dreams, into hearts that still listened. He spoke of unity, of remembrance, of the breath that binds all things. The watchers heard him. Some wept, others turned away.
Azazel raged in secret places, his fire devouring the mountains.
But Sariel lingered near, silent as dawn, his dimmed light watching from afar. One night, as Enoch rested beneath an ancient tree, Sariel appeared once more. His face was pale with sorrow, but his eyes glimmered faintly with peace. The decree has been written, he said softly. The flood will come. The gates of heaven will seal. Our names will be struck from the songs. Yet you will walk between the worlds once more. You will be taken before the waters rise. Enoch's breath caught. Taken, but I am not worthy? No one is, Sariel murmured. That is why grace chooses the listener, not the strong. He placed a hand over Enoch's heart, and the ring within it burned with tender flame. Keep the light as it was, unbound by pride, unbroken by sorrow. For when heaven closes its gates, one door shall still remain open within you. Then the angel faded, his form dissolving into 1,000 pale motes of light. The air shimmered for a long time afterward, as though unwilling to let him go. Enoch lay awake beneath the trembling stars, listening to the world breathe. Somewhere far off, he could hear the watchers mourning, their voices woven with regret, their beauty dimming with each passing day. The earth groaned in quiet preparation, like a mother awaiting labor, and Enoch understood the time of balance had ended. The time of reckoning would begin. He pressed his hand to the soil, whispering softly, "Even if all light falls, I will remember its song." The wind answered, faint but resolute, "And the song will remember you." Days passed into weeks, though time no longer moved as it once did. The heavens dimmed by degrees, their light strained through a veil of sorrow. Even the sun seemed weary, its rays slower, heavier, as if reluctant to witness what was unfolding below. The watchers had begun to fade. Their radiance, once glorious, now wavered like candles in a rising wind. Their gifts had outlived their innocence. Their wisdom had become weight. They walked among the ruins of their own making. Temples overgrown with silence, rivers clouded with the dust of idols. Humanity, dazzled by their knowledge, had forgotten to look upward. Enoch moved through this twilight world as one carrying both torch and tomb. The crystal ring pulsed faintly beneath his robe, its light growing weaker with each day. He could feel it grieving, for heaven, for earth, for the fragile thread that bound them once as one breath. He wandered through the fields of the east, where angels once sang the dawn into being. Now only wind moved there, whispering faint hymns through empty grass. The air itself seemed to remember the music that had been lost. One evening, Enoch came upon a valley of glass. It shone under the moon like a sea frozen in mid-breath. There the watchers had gathered, those few who had not yet surrendered to despair. Their wings were tattered, their eyes dim, and at their center stood Sariel, his form cloaked in faint silver light. When Enoch approached, the watchers turned their faces toward him. There was no anger in them, only shame. Their voices rose as one, soft and broken, like the echo of a hymn long forgotten. We once carried the breath of creation, they said. Now we are exiles of our own desire. What can be done to unmake the unmaking? Enoch bowed deeply, his eyes closed in reverence and sorrow. The covenant still remembers you, he said quietly. But remembrance cannot be forced, and it must be returned to. Sariel stepped forward, the faint gleam of his light reflecting in Enoch's eyes. The others have turned away, he said.
Azazel's fire grows across the mountains.
He believes he can reignite heaven's flame without heaven's will. Enoch's gaze fell. Fire that forgets its source only consumes itself. Sariel nodded slowly. Then you know what must come. The flood is mercy disguised as destruction. It will cleanse, but it will also forget. What remains will be only what you remember. The wind stirred around them, carrying with it the faint hum of distant thunder. The air trembled, not from storm, but from divine decision. Sariel lifted his face to the heavens. We have walked too far from our light, and now even repentance feels like shadow. He turned to Enoch. When the time comes, you must ascend, not in body alone, but in remembrance. Take with you what heaven still loves of earth, and leave behind what must return to silence. Enoch's heart broke within him. Will I see you again? Sariel's smile was small but eternal. In every wind that remembers its song. Then the watchers, one by one, began to dissolve. Their forms became mist, their voices became sighs, their light scattered into the night like falling seeds. The valley dimmed, yet shimmered faintly with lingering grace, a memory of what had been.
Enoch stood alone among the remnants.
The air was thick with sorrow and strange beauty. He knelt, placing his palm upon the cold glass ground. The crystal ring upon his hand flared one final time, sending a wave of light across the valley. Wherever it touched, the ground brightened. Not in fire, but in quiet glow. It was as if he were writing a eulogy for angels, inscribed not in words, but in light. He whispered, "May your fall become flight again when all things are remembered." The wind rose gently in response, circling him once, then drifting toward the horizon where mountains waited like silent witnesses. And for a moment, just one, Enoch saw what was coming. He saw oceans lifting themselves toward the sky. He saw cities swallowed by their own reflections. He saw the stars turning their faces away, closing their eyes. And in the distance, a gate of light, half open, trembling, waiting for him. He closed his eyes. The ring's glow dimmed to a heartbeat. The silence that followed was not death, but transition. The pause before revelation. For 3 nights he fasted in the hills, speaking only to the wind. He drank from the dew, slept upon stone, and listened. He waited for the command, though it did not come in words. It came as a knowing, a quiet certainty that his journey toward the stair of clouds had begun. When the 4th dawn rose, pale and fragile, he stood. The air around him shimmered as if acknowledging the moment. Every sound grew still. The birds, the insects, even the rivers seemed to hold their breath. He looked once more upon the world that had raised him, the soil that had sung beneath his feet, the stars that had watched him sleep. He felt love, immense, wordless, impossible love, for a creation that was both wound and wonder. And with that love burning quietly in his chest, he began to walk. Each step he took felt lighter, the weight of earth loosening, the pull of heaven growing stronger. The air thickened with brightness. The winds he had once listened to gathered around him now, guiding him like unseen hands. As he climbed, he whispered to them, "When I am gone, sing still. Tell them the story of the light unbound.
Tell them it was never wrath that drowned the world, but mercy."
And the winds, tender and loyal, answered in unison. We will sing until silence remembers. The sky opened before him, not as storm, but as invitation. The clouds parted, revealing a soft, endless glow. The first step shimmered into being, translucent, woven from the breath of dawn. Enoch lifted his eyes. His body trembled, not from fear, but recognition.
He knew this place.
It was where the winds had been born, where the covenant had been spoken, where memory first took form. He took his first step upward, and the world exhaled. The ground beneath him sighed with gratitude. The air shimmered with farewell, and somewhere deep within the light, he heard the voice of Sariel one last time. Go, keeper of remembrance. The gate awaits. The morning Enoch began to rise, the world stood still.
No bird sang, no river moved.
The air shimmered faintly as though waiting for its own reflection. He stood upon the edge of the plain, where heaven seemed to lean low upon the mountains, and the first breath of dawn touched his face like a benediction. The crystal ring upon his hand pulsed softly, steady as a heartbeat. It no longer shone like stone or glass. Its light had turned inward, quiet and alive, as though it were listening to something greater than itself. And as Enoch raised his eyes to the horizon, he saw it. The stare of clouds, unfolding not from earth to sky, but from sky to earth. A bridge of breath descending in silence. Each step was woven from vapor and light, yet solid beneath his gaze, as though thought itself had taken form. They glowed with the same hue as dawn, the color of beginnings. The winds gathered at his feet, swirling gently as if to lift him. He took one step forward, then another. The air grew warmer. Time began to slow. Below him, the world blurred into silver mist. Mountains dissolving into memory, rivers bending into ribbons of light. The earth no longer felt heavy. He could feel the rhythm of creation moving through him, each breath an echo of the voice that once spoke stars into being. As he climbed, a sound began to rise, not music, not wind, but something between them. It was the song of the covenant, sung not in words, but in resonance. Every step vibrated like a note upon a divine instrument, and Enoch's body trembled with the sound. He could feel the memory of the 7 winds within him, each one harmonizing with the climb. Then came a voice, soft, near, familiar. "Do you still remember the breath?" He turned, and there stood Remiel, the angel who had once spoken to him upon the plain. His light was gentler now, no longer distant. It pulsed in rhythm with Enoch's own heart.
I remember, Enoch whispered.
But it grows faint the higher I rise. Remiel smiled faintly, because remembrance is the weight of love. The higher one ascends, the more one must release. Enoch paused upon the stair, gazing down. The earth was already distant, a sphere of soft light and shadow, spinning slowly beneath him. He could see flashes of water, gleams of fire, the breathing of mountains. It was beautiful, but heavy, as though it could not follow him further. "Must I forget to reach the gates?" he asked. "Not forget," said Remiel, "but forgive. To remember without pain is to carry light as it was meant, unbound." At that, Remiel vanished into the brightness ahead, leaving only the echo of his voice. "Climb until the silence answers." And so Enoch continued. The stair wound upward through veils of shifting gold. Around him moved fragments of the unseen, glimmers of thought, whispers of names. He passed through regions where stars were born, where the breath of God cooled into galaxies. Each realm sang its own color, its own tempo, its own prayer. He saw the rivers of light that angels drank from before descending into form. He saw the memory of the first dawn repeating itself endlessly. The great pulse that had never ceased since the beginning, yet for all its glory, he felt loneliness there, not absence, but awe so vast it pressed the
soul into stillness.
For every step upward widened the distance between himself and the world that still slept below. At the 50th step, he looked back once more. The earth was now only a blue shimmer wrapped in clouds. He saw the faint trace of cities, the slow turning of oceans, and he knew that soon even these would vanish beneath the flood of remembrance. He whispered softly, Forgive them, O light, for they do not remember the sound. And as if in answer, the winds below began to stir, carrying his words back across the world, into valleys, into dreams, into the hearts of those who still listened.
Higher and higher he climbed.
The stair grew narrower, the light denser. The air thinned until it no longer entered his lungs but his soul. He was breathing light now, not oxygen, not wind, just the living breath that had once hovered above the waters. When he reached the 100th step, he stopped.
Ahead, the light trembled as though alive.
It took form, vast and veiled, shifting like fire through mist. A presence filled the air, and every atom of his being fell silent. "Who comes?" said the voice. Not from before him, but from within him, as though his own spirit had remembered how to speak as it did before birth. "Enoch," he replied, his voice barely a whisper. The listener, "What do you seek?" "To return what was never mine." The silence deepened, warm and infinite. The stair itself seemed to pulse beneath him. Then the voice spoke again, tender as eternity. "You have carried remembrance through the forgetting, the breath through the storm. You are not here to return. You are here to remember me remembering you." At those words, Enoch wept. The tears rose from his eyes as spheres of light, floating upward until they dissolved into the brilliance above. He felt no sorrow, no fear, only the fullness of stillness. The stair no longer seemed to rise or fall. There was no up, no down, no distance, only expansion. He was not climbing toward heaven.
Heaven was opening within him.
The crystal ring upon his hand glowed once more, brighter than ever before, and then, gently, it dissolved. Its light seeped through his skin, into his veins, into his breath, until it was no longer ring nor symbol, but essence. He became the remembrance he carried. The voice now surrounding him spoke softly one final time. "The gates open not with power, but with peace." And with that, the light parted. The stair of clouds became a bridge of silence, and Enoch stepped through. The world below sighed, the winds paused, the waters stilled. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled like a heartbeat, and heaven began to remember the sound of its own creation. He stepped into a brightness that had no source, a radiance that did not burn but breathed. It wrapped around him as water wraps around light. Weightless, endless, alive. For the first time, Enoch felt what it was to move without moving, to rise without ascent. The stair behind him faded into mist. Before him stretched not walls or gates, but vastness, the living expanse of heaven itself. There were no stars here, for the stars were only echoes of this place. Every shimmer of the cosmos was born from this breath, every dawn a shadow of this dawn. He walked forward, though there was no ground, guided only by the pulse that hummed within his chest. The silence was deep, but not empty. It was full of remembrance, of names unspoken yet known. He could feel presences moving within it, vast and kind, their thoughts like music, too gentle for sound. They were the elders of light, the first creations of the Word, who had remained within the presence since before beginnings.
One of them approached.
Her form was not shape, but rhythm. Light bending as voice, harmony taking on outline.
"Child of breath," she said, "you have crossed the veil."
Enoch bowed his head, though he no longer knew where his body ended or began. "I have come as a listener," he said softly. "I carry remembrance." She reached forth a hand of radiance, touching where the ring had been. "You carry more than memory. You carry the wound of love, the ache that binds heaven and earth. Do you understand why you were chosen?"
"I do not," Enoch whispered.
"Because you did not seek to be chosen." The space around them quivered, as if heaven itself sighed. Through the light, Enoch could see faint patterns, rivers of gold, or perhaps thought, flowing in perfect rhythm. Each current shimmered with knowledge, each droplet a word of creation still being spoken.
"What is this place?" he asked.
"The Hall of Breath," she answered. "Every world that ever will be begins here, in sound too pure for matter." The voice sings, and we remember the melody until it becomes form. As she spoke, he began to hear it. The first word, the tone that gave birth to all existence. It was not language. It was a vibration of perfect compassion, folding upon itself until it became light, then stone, then seed, then soul. The sound filled him until he wept again. Every tear that left him rose like smoke, turning into light that joined the harmony. He understood then why silence was holy, not because it was empty, but because it was too full to contain.
"Can this harmony heal what was broken below?" he asked.
"It does not need to," said the elder. "All things below are still part of this song. They have only forgotten the tune."
"Even the flood that comes will not destroy, only it will retune."
The melody will begin again, purer, slower, closer to remembrance. Her voice faded as the light around her deepened into gold. Others gathered now, shapes of thought, faces made of presence. They circled Enoch, their voices blending into a single resonance that wrapped around him like wind. He felt himself lifted, not upward, but inward, into the center of their song. His body dissolved into light. He saw his own memories as rivers of sound, the first garden, the seven winds, Sariel's sorrow, the Watcher's descent, the children of the valley dreaming of stars. Every moment sang its own note, and all of them together formed one perfect circle. And in that circle he saw something else, something vast, patient, radiant, beyond vision, the presence.
It had no form, no face, no name that could be spoken.
Yet it was closer than breath, nearer than heartbeat. It filled the all between all things. Enoch fell within himself, not from fear, but from awe, too immense for motion.
Every thought, every question dissolved. Only awareness remained.
The presence spoke not in sound, but in being. All that is remembers me. Even what forgets remembers in longing. You have carried that longing faithfully. You have kept the circle unbroken. Enoch trembled.
Then the flood
Is not ending, but cleansing. Creation must exhale to breathe again. You have brought back its breath. Light pulsed through him, soft, rhythmic, eternal. He felt his own essence expand, his consciousness unfurling through the cosmos like dawn through mist. He could feel the heartbeat of every living thing, the sigh of mountains, the prayer of stars. The voice spoke again. "Return, my listener.
Speak what you have seen, but not as prophecy.
Speak as remembrance. For men forget what they fear, but they remember what they love." He bowed his head, though no body remained to bow.
How shall I return? I'm no longer of the earth.
The presence smiled, or perhaps the light itself smiled through him. You will not return as you left. The breath will guide you. The ring within you will open the gate. And as those words echoed through eternity, the harmony began to shift. The song that had held him lifted, turning into wind. The golden light around him began to fold, condensing into mist, then into cloud. He felt the weight of form returning, the slow gravity of flesh, the soft tether of the world below. He opened his eyes. He stood once again upon the stair of clouds, halfway between heaven and earth. The light of the presence still shimmered faintly within his skin. The air around him glowed, alive with memory. He took one breath, and in that breath he felt both realms inhaled together. He knew then that he had not been sent back as messenger nor as judge, but as bridge, a living path between what was above and what was below. The winds returned, circling him like children reuniting with their father. They sang softly through the clouds, carrying his renewed breath into every corner of creation. He descended slowly, step by step. Each step left behind a trace of gold in the mist, echoes of the word he had heard. The sky dimmed, the earth rose, and when his feet touched the soil again, he was both man and memory, both listener and echo. The world had begun to tremble. The flood was near, and Enoch, keeper of the breath, stood ready to remember on behalf of all creation. When Enoch's feet touched the earth again, the ground shivered beneath him as though even the soil recognized that something more than a man had returned. The air around him was thick with stillness, the kind that comes before revelation. He stood upon the same plain where he once watched the stars, yet the world no longer appeared as it had. Everything shimmered faintly with hidden meaning, each leaf, each stone, each grain of sand humming with the residue of divine breath. The winds approached him one by one, their voices soft with reverence. "The stair remembers your step," said the first. "The breath you carry is not your own," whispered the second. "The earth awaits your word," murmured the third.
Enoch bowed his head.
"Then let the word be peace." He looked toward the horizon, where storm clouds gathered like slow-moving mountains. They were not yet dark, but luminous from within, their centers pulsing with the light of unseen waters. The flood was not wrath. It was inevitability, creation preparing to exhale. He walked into the valley, where the people dwelled, farmers and shepherds, dreamers and builders, all too busy to notice the trembling beneath their feet. Yet when they saw Enoch approach, they felt something stir in their souls. A memory of calm older than birth. "Teacher," one of them said, "why does the sky look like water?" Enoch smiled gently. "Because the heavens remember how to weep." They gathered around him as he spoke, his voice carrying not command, but stillness. He told them of the stair that breathed, of the presence that sang, of the mercy hidden inside the coming flood. He did not speak of punishment nor doom, only of return. "The water will come," he said, "and it will take away what forgets. But what remembers will not drown. It will rise like breath." Many did not understand, yet they wept as he spoke, for his words did not enter their minds, but their blood, awakening echoes of the first covenant still sleeping within them. That night, when all had gone to rest, Enoch stood alone beneath the trembling sky. He could feel the waters stirring beneath the world, waiting for permission to rise. The ring, now part of his flesh, glowed faintly through his skin, pulsing with the rhythm of the deep. He knelt and placed his hands upon the soil. "Remember," he whispered to the earth, "when the waters come, remember the breath." The ground answered with a soft tremor, like a creature stirring in its sleep. The winds moved outward from him, carrying the whisper across the lands. Even the stars above seemed to listen. Then came a voice behind him, light as wind upon water. "You have done what was asked." He turned. It was Sariel, clothed now in twilight, his light faint but still beautiful. "The gates have opened," said the angel. "The waters will rise soon. You must ascend once more before the covenant renews itself." Enoch felt no fear. "If I go, who will remind them?" "You already have," said Sariel. "Your words are written in their breath. Every child born from this soil will carry a spark of remembrance. That is the true scripture. Not ink, not stone, but spirit." The angel lifted his hand, and a gentle wind encircled Enoch. "Come," he said. "The stair waits once more, though this time you shall not return." Enoch looked toward the sky, now split faintly with light. The clouds above him began to spiral, forming the same golden path he had climbed before. But now it reached both ways, downward into the deep, upward into the unseen. A bridge of mercy joining water to sky. He turned once more to the earth. The people slept unaware. Their dreams shimmered with fragments of the song he had carried from heaven. He smiled, knowing they would awaken into a new world, even if they did not remember why. "Tell them," he whispered to the wind, "that I did not ascend out of pride, but of love." Sariel nodded. "Love is the only ascent that endures." Enoch stepped into the spiral of light. The moment his foot touched it, the world exhaled. The rivers leapt upward. The mountains shuddered. The sky broke open with the sound of gentle thunder. The waters rose, clear, luminous, vast. Yet they did not destroy. They cleansed. They remembered.
As they climbed over fields and towers, they glowed faintly with a strange, calm fire, washing away noise and leaving behind silence.
Through the veil of rain, the people looked upward and saw a figure ascending the clouds, his form made of light and breath. They did not know his name, yet their hearts stirred with recognition. And when he vanished into the mist, a single ray of light broke through the clouds, reflecting in the floodwaters below. The light shimmered like a ring. Far above, in the endless expanse, Enoch passed once more through the stair of clouds. Yet this time there was no threshold, no voice asking who he was. The gates did not open, for there were no gates left to open. The covenant had returned to its circle. He moved through light that remembered him, through sound that carried his name like a melody. The presence awaited, not distant, but everywhere. "Is it done?" the voice asked.
"It is begun," Enoch answered.
And the voice, gentle as eternity, replied, "Then rest within me." He closed his eyes, and the breath that had once left heaven now returned home. Below, the flood covered the earth, yet in its depths glowed the quiet pulse of remembrance, the same light Enoch had carried in his heart. It would sleep there, patient as eternity, waiting for the day when mankind would remember again. And somewhere between heaven and earth, upon a stair made of clouds and silence, the listener finally slept, not as man, nor as angel, but as the breath between both. When the waters withdrew, they did not leave silence behind. They left a whisper. It moved through the valleys like a sigh through sleeping grass, carrying with it the scent of renewal and the echo of what had been washed away. The world was young again, cleansed but not empty. Beneath the soft hush of the new dawn, the breath of creation waited to speak once more. And there, at the edge of dawn and memory, stood the gate between breath and flame. It was not made of stone or light. It was made of threshold, that invisible moment between stillness and becoming. To look upon it was to see oneself as both dust and eternity, spark and silence.
Enoch stood before it, though he no longer bore the body of man.
His form shimmered between presence and thought, a being of remembrance wearing the shape of what once was. The winds swirled around him, familiar yet new, singing softly through the fractures of light. He could feel the world breathing again. The soil exhaled life into the roots. The rivers murmured their first prayers. Even the air shimmered with praise. Yet within this peace burned a single ember, a remnant of heaven's sorrow. The flame of knowing sealed behind the gate. Remiel's voice came to him, low and steady, carried by the wind. "Oh, before you return fully to the realm of the breath, you must pass through the flame. For remembrance without fire is only dream."
Enoch bowed his head.
"Then the flame is judgment?" "No," said the voice. "It is clarity. The fire does not condemn, it reveals." He stepped forward. The gate rippled as he approached, the air trembling like a heartbeat beneath his hand. He touched it, and it yielded like water, yet burned like light. The sensation was not pain, but unveiling. In an instant he was surrounded by vision, not of worlds, but of hearts. He saw every soul that would ever breathe, each carrying the same spark he had carried through the flood. He saw their triumphs, their losses, their forgettings, and their small, holy remembrances. And in every one of them he saw himself, the same breath wearing 1,000 faces. He fell to his knees. "All light returns," he whispered. The flame within the gate answered with warmth rather than words. It rose before him like dawn made of music, each ray a note from the first song. He could feel it beckoning him forward, not to consume, but to join.
And so he stepped through.
The moment he entered, the boundaries of self dissolved. He felt the fire not upon his skin, but within his memory. Every shadow he had carried, sorrow, doubt, even love, burned not to vanish, but to become light. He remembered the watchers, their longing, their fall, their tears. The fire moved through those memories gently, washing away guilt and leaving only compassion. He saw their rebellion not as evil, but as yearning misplaced, the ache of creation to touch its own maker. Then came the memory of the flood, the cries, the silence, the vast stillness that followed. The flame wrapped around it, transforming grief into song. Every lost life, every forgotten name became a note in the chorus of return. Enoch's breath deepened. Each inhalation was creation, each exhalation release. The flame grew brighter within him, expanding outward until his entire being was light remembering itself. Then, from within the brilliance, a shape emerged. A figure of fire and wind intertwined. It was neither angel nor man, but the union of both, the reflection of balance restored. Its voice was the soft roar of eternity. "Enoch," it said, "you have walked the breath and the storm, the silence and the song. Do you understand now what the gate is?" He looked into the fire and saw his own reflection, infinite, breathing, aflame. "It is the place where love remembers itself," he said. The figure smiled. "Yes, the breath gives life, the flame gives meaning. Together they are the covenant renewed." As the words faded, the fire folded inward, becoming a single spark that settled upon Enoch's brow. The gate behind him dissolved into wind. The world exhaled again, and the sound of rain began to fall softly. Not the rain of judgment, but of renewal. He stood beneath it, glowing faintly, the light within his body shimmering through each droplet. Every raindrop that touched him turned to gold, carrying fragments of his remembrance into the rivers, into the soil, into the veins of creation. For 3 days and 3 nights he stood thus, neither mortal nor divine, the still point between breath and flame. And when the third dawn rose, he opened his eyes, and the horizon itself bowed in recognition. He had passed through the gate. He was no longer only the listener. He had become the bridge. The winds gathered once more around him, whispering like children around their elder. "The covenant breathes again," they sang.
Heaven remembers through you.
Enoch lifted his face to the sun, its warmth no longer distant, but kin. "Then let the light walk again among men," he said, not as thunder,
As memory.
and the fire within him pulsed in answer. Soft, endless, eternal. The fire within him did not fade. It became rhythm, a pulse that moved with his every breath, a harmony that hummed in his silence. When he opened his eyes again, the world around him had changed. The sky was deeper, its color closer to eternity. The mountains shimmered with faint light as if dusted by the ashes of heaven. He was still upon the same earth, yet he saw it now as heaven saw it, not as ground, but as living light slowed into matter. He walked through the renewed land, and where his feet touched, the grass bent in reverence. The animals did not flee from him. They came close, sensing the stillness that moved with him. The rivers sang softly as he passed, and the wind bowed, remembering its first song. The gate he had crossed still shimmered faintly behind him, an invisible line where the breath of God touched the fire of awakening. Beyond it, he could hear faint echoes, laughter, prayer, the sound of hearts being born anew. Humanity had begun again. But deep within, Enoch knew the story was not yet complete. The fire within him still whispered, "There is more." As he walked, a figure appeared upon the horizon, radiant yet cloaked, tall as a cedar, calm as the sea at dawn. It was not Sariel nor Remiel, but one Enoch had never seen before. His light burned with the hue of sunrise, the color between forgiveness and promise. "I am Uriel," said the being, bowing slightly, keeper of the flame that remembers. Enoch returned the bow. "Then you are the guardian of this gate." "I am its witness," Uriel replied. "You have passed through what few can endure, that is the fire of remembrance. But before your rest is granted, you must complete what began when you first lifted the ring. The breath and the flame must be joined in word, in the telling." Enoch lowered his head. "Then I must speak again." "Yes," said Uriel, "but not to warn, to awaken. The flame burns in vain if not shared. You are to become its echo among men, the voice that tells them they are not separate from the light they seek." The angel extended his hand, and from the palm of light there rose a sphere, half luminous, half shadowed, spinning slowly in balance. "This is the breath and the flame as one," Uriel said. "Take it within you, and you shall speak with the voice of remembrance itself." Enoch reached out. The moment his fingers brushed the sphere, it dissolved into mist and entered his chest. He gasped, feeling both weightless and infinite. The winds stirred violently, bending trees and scattering light. From his heart rose a tone, low, resonant, unending. It filled the air, rippling through the mountains and the deep valleys beyond. It was not a sound of power. It was the sound of recognition. Those who lived in the plains below lifted their heads. Infants stopped crying. Birds folded their wings and listened. Even the rivers slowed their flow to hear it. For that sound, that sacred vibration, awakened something in all living things, the memory of the first breath. Uriel smiled faintly.
"The song of balance," he said.
"You have become its keeper." Enoch's light softened, his form more human now, though within his eyes burned the reflection of eternity. He looked toward the people below. "They do not yet understand," he said. "They do not need to," answered Uriel. "Understanding will come when they begin to listen. You have reminded creation how to hear." The angel began to fade, his light scattering into rays that stretched across the horizon. "When the flame within you rests, the breath will carry it forward. The song will never die, for it has become the silence between their heartbeats." And then he was gone. Enoch stood alone once more. The winds had quieted. The mountains gleamed in still peace. He breathed deeply, feeling the rhythm of heaven and earth merging through him. He spoke softly, to no one and to everything. "The gate is not a place, but a way of seeing. To pass through it is to know that every flame is born of breath, and every breath is the echo of flame." He descended slowly toward the valley, where new trees grew from the soaked earth. Life was awakening again, fragile, luminous, unaware of its own holiness. The people who remained looked upon him with awe, not fear. They did not know his name, yet they felt that they had known him before. He spoke to them in gentle voice, words flowing like wind over water. "Do not build towers to the sky," he said.
"The sky already lives within you."
"Do not chase light, breathe it." They listened, though they could not comprehend. Yet, long after he left, they found themselves breathing differently. Slower, deeper, as if remembering something they had once known before birth. Night fell gently. Enoch sat upon a hill overlooking the sleeping world. The stars shimmered above like memories reborn. The fire within him pulsed one last time, steady and bright. He understood then that his journey had never been about ascent or return. It had been about becoming the bridge, about teaching light to remember dust, and dust to remember light. The winds gathered one final time around him, tender as old friends. "Will you rest now?" they asked. "Soon," he whispered, "when the song no longer needs me." They circled him once, then scattered into the world, into forests, into oceans, into the breath of every living thing. Their departure was not farewell, but fulfillment. As dawn approached, Enoch's form grew faint. His body became light, his light became air, and his air became the soft pulse that lingers before sunrise. The world inhaled, and for a moment, every creature, every blade of grass, every drifting cloud breathed as one. It was as though creation itself whispered, "We remember." The dawn that followed was unlike any before it. The sky did not brighten in color alone, it awakened. The horizon stretched like an eye opening after long sleep, and every particle of air shimmered as though aware of its own divine origin. The world, for a heartbeat, remembered it was light. Enoch stood upon the hill, his form a soft radiance clothed in the gentleness of man. The people below stirred from their rest, feeling a strange calm descend upon them. A peace without reason, a memory without thought. It was as though heaven was breathing through the morning wind. He closed his eyes, and the fire within him stirred again. Not as a flame, but as illumination. He could feel it pulsing behind his ribs, warm and patient. It was the breath and the flame joined as one, the covenant made flesh.
"Now the circle is whole," he whispered.
The ground beneath him hummed with resonance. Every living thing responded. The rivers glowed faintly. The trees turned their leaves toward the light. Even the shadows softened, no longer hiding, but harmonizing. The winds returned, quieter now, their task nearly complete. "You have walked both realms," they said. "What remains is the gift." Enoch listened. "The gift?" "The telling," replied the wind. "You have carried the breath and crossed the flame, but remembrance dies if it is not given. Speak it once more so the generations may hear what heaven sounds like." He nodded. "Then I would speak." The people gathered once more in the valley. They came not out of command. Star softened. "Would you read the story of the world to come?" He hesitated. "If I read, will I change it?"
"All that is read is already becoming," said the light.
"The reader is part of the writing." Enoch smiled faintly. "Then let me listen once more." And the star opened wider. From within poured visions like rivers of flame. He saw futures branching like the veins of leaves, each glowing with choice. He saw the children of earth rising again, their eyes filled with wonder and sorrow. He saw prophets, kings, wanderers, and poets, each hearing fragments of the song he had carried, each mistaking it for their own. He saw that remembrance would survive not as knowledge, but as longing, a yearning that would drive hearts to seek what was once whole. He reached out his hand and touched the stream of light, and as he did, it divided into two currents, one bright, one dim. The star spoke again, its tone soft but grave. "These are the twin rivers of creation, memory and forgetting. Both must flow or the world will stagnate. Without forgetting, nothing can begin anew. Without memory, nothing can return home." Enoch bowed his head. "Then I will remember enough for both." The star glowed brighter. "And so you shall remain the listener, the keeper of the breath. The first to remember, the last to forget." And the music of the library swelled, vast, endless, and unbearably gentle. The song deepened.
It moved through Enoch like wind through 1,000 strings, each vibration weaving its story through his being.
The stars around him were not fixed. They swayed like lanterns in a celestial breeze, pulsing with the breath of unseen life. And he understood. These lights were not merely bodies of fire, but the living memory of love. He stepped forward into the symphony, his feet leaving trails of golden resonance behind him.
Every motion birthed sound, every thought birthed light.
The air shimmered like water. It felt not like walking through space, but through meaning. Each step carried him deeper into understanding.
"Tell me," he whispered to the great star, "why does heaven remember what earth forgets?"
The star's glow dimmed softly, as though considering the question. "Because heaven sees not loss, but pattern," it replied. "To forget is not failure, but rhythm. The tide retreats so that it may return. The silence after song is not absence. It is the moment that gives music its shape." Enoch bowed his head. "Then even sorrow is sacred." "Yes," said the voice, "for it is sorrow that keeps memory alive. It reminds the light that it was once shadow, and the shadow that it was once light. Every tear shed upon the earth becomes a star in these halls. That is why the heavens glitter. They are the tears of remembering." He looked upward. The stars indeed shimmered like the eyes of weeping angels, each one a story of love, lost and found. Their beauty was not joy without pain, but the union of both. As he watched, a single star descended from the vastness and hovered before him. It flickered gently, small as a candle, yet containing galaxies within its heart. "Whose memory is this?" Enoch asked.
"It is yours," said the voice.
He reached out and touched it. The moment his fingers brushed its surface, visions spilled forth like liquid light. He saw the garden before the fall, heard the rivers sing again, felt the seven winds embracing him as they once had on the mountain. He saw Sariel weeping at the edge of heaven, his tears becoming rain upon the earth. He saw the floodwaters glowing as they rose, whispering his name as they carried away the old world. Then came something new, the memory of his own ascent, seen not from within himself, but from the eyes of the stars. He saw his form rise through veils of cloud, each step releasing ripples of light that awakened constellations yet unborn. Every motion had written a verse in heaven's hymn book. He withdrew his hand, trembling. "I did not know the stars watched me. They watch everything that remembers," said the great voice. "Even now their light travels through time, carrying your story to worlds not yet formed. Memory does not end. It travels outward like light itself." He gazed into the distance, where the edge of the library blurred into infinity. Beyond that horizon shimmered the void, the womb of unspoken possibility. He felt drawn toward it, not from curiosity, but from calling. "What lies beyond memory?" he asked. The answer came as a whisper, creation yet to be. And Enoch understood the library of stars was not an archive of the past. It was the heart of becoming. Each remembered thing birthed the next. Memory was not a mirror, it was a seed. He walked among the stars, his hands brushing against orbs of living history. Each touch brought a soft hum, a note added to the symphony. He heard civilizations rising and falling, hearts breaking and healing, prayers whispered in darkness and answered in dawn. All of it, every act, every sigh, was here, woven into the great pattern. Then the music shifted. It became lower, slower, the rhythm of deep time. From the distance came a faint glow, a spiral of starlight descending toward him like a crown. Within it, he saw the faces of those yet to be. Children unborn, voices unspoken, songs unwritten. He reached toward them, and their light responded, swirling around him in playful affection. Each child carried a spark of his own breath, the remnant of the covenant he had left within the human heart. They did not know his name, yet they lived because he had remembered. Their laughter echoed like silver bells through eternity. And for the first time since leaving the earth, Enoch smiled fully. "And remembrance has not ended," he said. "It has only begun again." The voice of the great star grew softer, almost maternal. "Yes, listener, for even now upon the world below, the first child of the new age is breathing, and with her breath the song begins anew." He listened, and faintly, across the chasm between heaven and earth, he heard it, the cry of a newborn. It was small, fragile, yet it contained the tone of the first word. He fell to his knees, overwhelmed. The cycle continues.
"The circle never ends," said the light.
The library is not a monument. It is a pulse. Each life, each death, each dawn adds to its rhythm. You are the keeper of its turning. Enoch closed his eyes. The light within him pulsed in harmony with the stars. He could feel the breath of the infant, the sigh of the oceans, the hum of the galaxies, all as one. And when he opened his eyes again, he saw himself reflected across the cosmos, not as a figure, but as a pattern of light repeating endlessly, a reminder written into creation that heaven and earth were never apart. He rose slowly. "Then I shall listen until the song ends." The voice replied, "The song never ends.
It only changes hands."
And as he walked deeper into the library, the stars bent their light toward him, whispering his name, not in sound, but in gratitude. For he was no longer the visitor, nor even the listener. He was part of the music itself. The light folded around Enoch as though the heavens themselves had drawn breath. The stars pulsed slower now, their music turning inward, drawing him toward the center of their song, a place where even sound dissolved into knowing. He followed the current, no longer walking, for there was no distance left between his being and the cosmos. He was within the memory of God, and God was within his remembrance. The nearer he came to the heart of the library, the more the light changed. It grew softer, whiter, no longer dazzling, but compassionate. The stars there did not shine as suns. They glowed like candles, steady and close. Their radiance was the gentleness of truth, the light that reveals without wounding. In that still place, Enoch saw something he had never seen before. The shadows of stars. They shimmered faintly beside each flame, delicate as breath, alive as pulse. And the realization came to him like a tear of clarity. Every memory, no matter how bright, casts a shadow. Every act of love leaves an echo of longing behind. Even in heaven, remembering carries the ache of distance. He reached toward one of the shadowed lights, and it rippled at his touch, revealing a vision, the face of a man crying alone beneath a broken sky. It was a human moment, forgotten by history, insignificant to time, yet here it was, held forever in the tenderness of the stars.
Why do you keep even this?
Enoch asked softly. The great star's voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Because nothing unloved may leave the circle. Sorrow must be held until it learns to sing. The shadow shimmered once, then merged back into its twin flame, complete again. Enoch stood in silence. Around him the constellations shifted, not randomly, but like words rearranging themselves in an eternal sentence. He could feel meaning moving through them, a divine language written not in ink, but in relationship. It came to him then that this library was not only a record, it was alive. Every star spoke to its neighbor.
Every light remembered the one beside it.
Heaven was not still. It was breathing, evolving, like a great heart, remembering itself with every beat. He raised his gaze and saw, in the farthest distance, a spiral of gold so vast it dwarfed galaxies. It pulsed slowly, the rhythm of creation itself. From its center radiated a tone too deep for ears, yet his whole being resonated with it. It was the voice of the word, the first syllable that had called light from silence. And he knew this was the core of the library, the source, the remembrance before all remembrance. He moved toward it, not by will but by surrender. The closer he came, the more transparent he became. His form thinned into brightness until he was almost entirely light. He felt no loss, only belonging. When he reached the edge of the spiral, the great voice spoke again, tender as dawn. "Enoch, listener, what do you seek in this final chamber?" He bowed low, though no ground lay beneath him. "I seek to hear the silence before the first word. The moment when all things still rested in you." "Then release all names," said the voice. "For names are the chains of remembrance."
Only the nameless can hear the source.
He obeyed. He released the names of the angels. He released the names of winds. He released his own. And when the last name fell away, silence filled him. Vast, perfect, luminous. From that silence rose a sound so subtle it could have been his own breath. It was not melody nor speech, but the rhythm of being itself.
It pulsed once.
And in that single beat, Enoch understood everything that had ever been. He saw the circle complete. The breath that became flame. The flame that became word. The word that became world. And the world that breathed again into God. There was no end. No beginning.
Only return.
The voice spoke one final time, but now it was not separate from him. It spoke as him. This is remembrance without boundary. You have become the word that listens to itself. He wept, but his tears were light. They rose and drifted outward, falling as new stars into the fabric of the library. And those new stars began to hum with their own small songs, gentle and clear, joining the chorus of creation. When he finally opened his eyes again, he stood upon no stair, no threshold. He stood within the spiral itself, at peace. The stars no longer surrounded him. They were him. Each pulse of their light was his heartbeat, each shimmer his thought. For the first time, heaven itself had a listener who was also its echo. And as he looked outward, he saw the universe below. Countless worlds, spinning, dreaming, remembering. The earth glowed faintly in the distance, wrapped in clouds, breathing softly in its sleep. He watched the dawn rise upon it, slow and patient. He smiled. The story continues. The stars shimmered in reply. It always will. Then the great light dimmed gently, folding around him in warmth. Rest, Enoch, you have entered the eternal verse. And the library of stars sang softly, a lullaby written before time. The melody of peace. Its rhythm was the heartbeat of all creation, slow and sacred, endless as grace. There came a stillness in the heavens, the kind of silence that hums with creation's pause, the soft breath between remembering and becoming again. From the heart of the library of stars, Enoch looked downward once more. The earth, veiled in thin mist, revolved beneath the gaze of heaven like a pearl, suspended in living light. It pulsed faintly, its rivers gleaming as threads of silver, its mountains dreaming in shades of dawn. He knew that within its soil, beneath its roots and oceans, slept the memory of the covenant, the promise spoken before time began, when God breathed the word, return. And so the call came to him again, not as command, but as compassion. It said, we go and remind the dust of what it was made for. He descended as light does when it becomes thought. His brilliance dimmed until it could walk among matter without burning it. When he touched the air, the wind stirred in remembrance. When his foot met the earth, the ground exhaled the scent of rain. He stood once more in the realm of form, the world after the flood, clean but quiet, raw as clay before shaping. The sun had just begun to rise, scattering its gold upon the waters. The animals emerged from their shelters, blinking at a sky washed clear of sorrow. Enoch walked among them, his robe woven of light and shadow. He carried no staff, no seal, no crown, only a calm that was older than sound. The ring, now part of his being, glowed faintly beneath his skin, its pulse merging with the beat of the world. As he passed, flowers unfolded without touch. The rivers bent their currents to greet him. Yet the beauty of creation, though whole again, trembled with fragility. The balance of heaven and earth was like a mirror newly repaired, delicate, waiting for remembrance to hold it steady. He reached a hill where the soil was soft and fragrant.
Kneeling, he pressed his hand into the earth.
The dust shimmered, as though waking from a long dream. Within it, he saw sparks of crystalline light, tiny reflections of the stars above. He smiled faintly. You remember, he whispered. You always did. The dust answered not in words, but in vibration. It thrummed gently beneath his palm, glowing faintly in rhythm with his pulse. The voice of the earth rose like a sigh. We are what was broken and what endures. We remember the breath that shaped us. Enoch closed his eyes. Then hear the promise renewed. The covenant of heaven is not only with light, it is with you, the patient dust. You are not lesser. You are the vessel of the divine. And the dust glowed brighter, its particles lifting briefly, swirling in the wind like sparks of living crystal. They gathered around him, forming a soft halo of gold and white, whispering in voices too small to be heard, yet too powerful to be denied. From that dust, shapes began to form. Not people, but symbols. Circles, spirals, and patterns of light imprinted themselves upon the earth, glowing faintly in the morning air. They were the language of the covenant, the writing of remembrance. Enoch watched as the earth drew its own scripture, the sacred geometry of unity. Each pattern reflected the truth he had seen in the library of stars, the balance between memory and forgetting, the dance of breath and flame, crystal and dust. And then softly, the voice spoke again. The same voice that had once called him from the world. You have carried the light through shadow and returned it to the soil. Now teach creation what it means to be whole. Enoch rose. How can the infinite dwell in the finite without breaking it? Through gentleness, said the voice, through patience, through love. He understood. The covenant was not an agreement written in stone or decree. It was a relationship between all things. It was the promise that the Creator would not dwell above, but within.
Not apart but among.
He looked down at the dust, still glowing faintly. Then you are the crystal that remembers, and I am the breath that awakens. And the dust replied, Together we are life. The winds stirred once more, carrying that phrase through the valleys, across the plains, into the hearts of creatures stirring to new dawn. Trees swayed.
Rivers gleamed. Even the mountains seemed to bow, their peaks catching the light like crowns of glass.
The earth was signing its covenant anew, not through words, but through participation, through being alive again. Enoch stretched his hand toward the horizon. The ring within his palm shone brighter, sending a single beam of light into the sky. It met the morning sun and refracted into colors unseen, hues that shimmered beyond human sight, the tones of unity. And far above, the stars answered. They pulsed once, twice, like hearts acknowledging kin. He whispered, The covenant of crystal and dust is sealed. Heaven remembers and earth listens. The voice answered gently, And now, listener, the world no longer needs you to speak. It knows how to remember itself. Enoch lowered his hand. His light dimmed until it was no brighter than that of any man beneath the sky. He looked around, at the quiet hills, the whispering wind, the glow of life returning to the soil. He smiled, not in triumph, but in rest. And I shall walk among them, he said, not as light, but as a story the world tells itself when it dreams. And as he walked down the hill, the dust rose softly in his wake, catching the sunlight and glittering like tiny fragments of heaven scattered upon the ground. Every step he took became memory, and every breath he gave became prayer. For in that moment, heaven and earth were one body, breathing together. The world was quiet now, not the silence
of emptiness, but the quiet of peace after revelation.
The air itself seemed to glow, soft and golden, filled with invisible harmonies. The covenant had been renewed, and the breath and the dust remembered each other once more. Enoch walked among the living things that had survived the waters. The trees leaned toward him, their leaves whispering like old friends reunited. The animals did not flee, for they knew his scent, the scent of stillness, of heaven clothed in soil. He spoke little. He did not need to. His presence carried the language of the new covenant, that every atom of dust held the possibility of light, and every breath of light longed to rest within dust. He paused beside a stream newly carved by the flood. The water shimmered with faint luminescence, and when he cupped his hands to drink, he saw stars reflected in it. They pulsed as if greeting him, not as distant watchers, but as kin. "Do you see?" said the wind around him.
Heaven no longer looks down.
It looks through. Enoch smiled. "Then the covenant is not a bridge between realms," he said softly. "It is a mirror." He wandered for many days, following the slow rebirth of the earth. Wherever he went, life followed. Flowers sprouted from stones, and birds began to sing new songs whose notes seemed to echo those he had heard in the library of stars. Each night, when the world fell asleep, he would gaze at the constellations above and see them shifting, not to form new shapes, but to mirror the ones being carved into the soil below. Heaven was learning from earth again. The two realms had begun to reflect one another. One evening, as twilight bathed the land in silver, Enoch reached a wide plain where the remnants of a village lay half buried in silt. The people who had returned to rebuild were weary, their hearts heavy with what they could not name, a faint grief for what the waters had taken. He walked among them unseen, a glimmer of light in the periphery of their vision. Children laughed and pointed, but the elders hushed them, for they sensed that the sacred was near. At the center of the plain, a single woman knelt in prayer beside a small mound of soil. Enoch approached quietly. Her hands were covered in earth. Her eyes were red with tears. "Why do you cry, child of dust?" he asked. She looked up, though she could not see him clearly, only a shimmer in the dusk. "I plant seeds," she said, "but I do not know if they will grow. The soil remembers the flood more than the sun." Enoch knelt beside her, his voice a murmur. "The earth does not forget sorrow, so it may be healed. The flood was not death, but cleansing. Speak to the soil gently, and it will remember joy." She closed her eyes and pressed her palms to the ground. "Then teach me how to speak to it." Enoch reached out his hand and let the faint light of the covenant flow through his fingers into the soil. The air around them shimmered faintly, and the mound beneath her hands began to glow. Small green shoots emerged, tender and new. The woman gasped, laughter and tears mingling in her throat.
"It lives!"
"It always lived," said Enoch. "It only waited to be remembered." He looked at her face. Simple, radiant, mortal. And he felt something stir within him. The fire of remembrance, once celestial and vast, now softened into compassion. This was the reason he had returned. Not to teach angels, but to remind the human heart that it too was divine dust. The woman bowed her head, whispering a prayer she did not understand. "Who are you?" "Only a listener," he said. And then he rose and walked away, leaving behind the faint scent of rain and the sound of the earth breathing. That night a wind passed through the valley. Warm, fragrant, filled with unseen light. It carried Enoch's whisper across the land. "You are not born from ashes, but from memory. You are dust that dreams, and your dreams are how heaven remembers itself." The people stirred in their sleep, hearts easing, though they did not know why. In their dreams, they saw light shining through soil, rivers of glass flowing beneath their feet, and stars blooming from the ground. From that night forward, seeds sprouted faster, rain came softer, and dawn seemed to linger longer upon the land.
And Enoch wandered on, no longer a man, but a melody.
Wherever the wind moved, his presence lingered, a whisper between worlds. He was felt in the rustle of leaves, in the hush before sunrise, in the breath drawn between sob and song. The covenant was alive, written not in heavens or scripture, but in every living pulse of creation. And as the world grew, so did the memory of his presence. The children of that generation would later say that the air itself had changed, that sometimes when one prayed or wept in solitude, a voice would rise from the wind and whisper, "Remember, it was the dust speaking, the crystal within creation answering its maker." High above, the library of stars shimmered with new brightness. The lights rearranged themselves, forming a new pattern, a shape like two hands cupped together, holding a sphere of both fire and soil. And from that sphere radiated a quiet peace, the same pulse that now beat within the heart of every living thing. The covenant of crystal and dust had been fulfilled, not as law, but as song. Dawn came softly upon the new world, pouring through the valleys like milk and gold. The sky above glowed with the color of beginnings. Not blue, not white, but something between, a hue that seemed to breathe. The world had been washed clean, yet it was not empty. It was awake, and Enoch walked its fields like a thought of God, lingering between one heartbeat and the next. His steps were soundless. His robe shimmered not as flame, but as reflection. Light, remembering where it had been. He crossed rivers that murmured the songs of angels who had once wept. He passed groves where trees whispered his name in their leaves, not as worship, but as familiarity. Even the stones seemed to hum softly beneath him, alive with gratitude. He looked toward the horizon, where mountains blushed with the light of morning. Beyond them lay the vast plain where humankind would grow again. From families to tribes, from wanderers to nations, he saw them all in vision, builders and poets, kings and shepherds, each carrying within them a spark of the same remembrance. Some would bury it deep,
Others would let it rise.
but the covenant would endure. As he walked, he met no one at first, until he came to a small settlement, a gathering of survivors who lived in tents of woven grass near the river's edge. They were quiet people, humble and reverent. When they saw him approaching, they did not speak, for they felt the calm that came before prophecy. An elder stepped forward, his hair white, his eyes clouded with the weariness of remembrance.
You walk as one who has seen the fire, he said softly.
Enoch inclined his head, and you live as one who still carries its warmth. The old man bowed.
Tell us, stranger of light, will the flood come again?
Enoch looked upon him with tenderness.
Not in water, he said.
But in memory, each time the heart forgets its origin, a flood will rise within it, not to punish but to cleanse. The elder nodded slowly, understanding beyond words. Then how shall we live? By gentleness, Enoch said, by remembering that the divine breath dwells in the lowliest grain of dust and the highest flame alike. You are both. A murmur moved through the small gathering, not of fear, but of peace. The people sat upon the ground, forming a circle around him, waiting, and Enoch spoke to them of the covenant. He told them that the stars above were not distant fires, but witnesses, each one carrying a promise that heaven would never again forget the earth. He told them that the soil beneath their feet was alive, listening, longing to be spoken to kindly. He told them that every act of love, no matter how small, polished the mirror between heaven and the world. The covenant of crystal and dust, he said, is not written upon stone or sky. It is written upon the breath. Each time you inhale, you receive the memory of the divine. Each time you exhale, you return it. The people wept quietly, though they did not know why. Something ancient in them had stirred, a memory too deep for language. Then a child, a small girl with dark eyes, stood and asked, "Will you stay with us?" Enoch smiled gently. "I already am." And indeed, as he spoke, a faint light passed through the circle. The air grew warmer. The scent of wildflowers filled the wind. Every heart present felt lighter, as though they had remembered how to breathe after long holding their breath. That night, the people gathered by the river. The moon hung low and full, its reflection rippling across the water like liquid glass. Enoch sat among them as they sang, soft, untrained voices blending with the sound of the current. He felt the world's pulse beneath the song, the vibration of the renewed covenant. The stars above shimmered in response, their light bending faintly toward the earth, joining the music. It was then that he heard again the voice that had once called him from the dust. "Listener," it said, "your task is fulfilled. The covenant breathes through every heart now."
Will you rest? Enoch lifted his face toward the heavens. I will, but not in forgetting.
Let me remain where memory sleeps between realms. A whisper in their dreams, a warmth in their breath.
Let me be the silence that teaches them to listen.
The voice paused and then replied, "Then so it shall be. You shall become the peace that passes through them unnoticed. You shall rest not in place, but in presence." As the words faded, the wind shifted. The light of the moon deepened, shimmering around him. The people, unaware, continued their song, their voices rising like incense through the air. Enoch's form began to fade, dissolving into the glow. His outline shimmered, then blurred, until he was no longer separate from the night. Only part of it, vast and tender. But before his light disappeared completely, he whispered to the wind, "When they feel stillness, let them know it is love. When they feel awe, let them know it is remembrance.
And when they feel breath, let them know it is me and you and all that ever was."
And the wind carried his final breath across the river, across the sleeping tents, through the trees, and out into the wide, waiting world. The people awoke the next morning to find the air strangely alive. The river shimmered with faint gold. The grass bent, though no breeze stirred. They felt no fear, only peace, as if someone they had loved deeply had walked past them in a dream. The child who had spoken to Enoch smiled at the sky and said, "He stayed." And in that moment, a soft gust of wind brushed her cheek. Far above, the library of stars blazed brighter than before. The stars sang in rhythm with the world's new breath.
Heaven and earth had become mirrors, each reflecting the other's light.
And the covenant of crystal and dust lived on, not as memory of one man, but as the inheritance of all creation. For every dawn that rose after carried a whisper in its light, a silent vow repeated with every sunrise, "I remember you." And every night that followed answered with the same, from the stars above to the soil below, "And I remember you." The circle was unbroken.
And in that eternal exchange, the universe rested, as breathing as one.
Time drifted like mist upon the waters. Ages passed, soft and unmeasured. The earth, healed yet haunted, began to sing again. But though the covenant still pulsed within creation, though every breath carried the memory of heaven's peace, mankind, restless as always, began once more to dream beyond the boundaries of its blessing. The sons and daughters of those who had survived the flood grew numerous upon the face of the world. They tilled the ground, they raised their children, they built walls against the wind. They learned to shape metal again, to carve stone, to name the stars. And yet, in all their naming, they forgot to listen. For remembrance is a fragile thing. It does not shout, it whispers. And when the world grows loud with hunger and pride, the whisper is the first sound to be lost. Still, deep within certain hearts, the old pulse remained. Some children were born with eyes that lingered too long upon the sky, as if searching for someone they could not name. Others heard voices in the wind when they prayed, though they knew not whose. And among these dreamers and wanderers were born the sons of the forgotten light. They were not angels, nor prophets, nor kings. They were fragments, souls who carried faint echoes of the covenant's radiance within their blood. They were born wherever compassion outlived power, wherever a tear fell and did not harden into bitterness. Their hearts pulsed with the rhythm of the old breath, though they could not say why. In the early generations, these sons were wanderers, moving through deserts and forests drawn by longing. They were builders of small fires and speakers of small truths. Their words had the weight of ages in them, though they knew not the source. One of them, a shepherd named Irad, would lie upon the hills by night and speak to the stars. "Why do you watch me so?" he would whisper. "Why do I dream of stairs that lead to clouds?" And though he heard no reply, the stars flickered faintly in patterns that matched his heartbeat. In distant lands, another, a woman named Sapphira, wove her prayers into cloth. Each thread shimmered faintly when the light struck it, as though woven from memory itself. She would say to those who came to her, "This world is made of breath made visible. Speak gently to it, or it will fade." And far across the mountains, a youth named Elan wrote symbols into the sand, shapes that the wind erased by morning. He smiled each time it did. "If remembrance is true," he said, "it will not need to last. It will live again tomorrow." These were the children of the forgotten light. the inheritors of Enoch's breath, though they knew his name only as rumour, a legend whispered by rivers and rain. The old songs of heaven had become myths now, fragments told around fires when the nights were long. Men said there had once been a man who walked between worlds, who spoke to stars as equals. Some believed, most did not. But the earth still remembered, and sometimes when the wind moved just right, the dust glimmered faintly with echoes of his passage. Then came a generation that began to hunger for the heavens again. They built towers not of faith, but of pride, stone upon stone, reaching upward to challenge rather than commune. They said, "We will make a name that even the stars must speak." And so they forgot that the stars already whispered their names written in love. The sons of the forgotten light watched in silence. They felt the shift in the air, the tremor of arrogance, the shadow of repetition. They gathered in secret places, caves where fire still remembered the first word, valleys where rivers spoke in silver tongues. Sapphira was among them, her hair woven with the glint of starlight. "They build toward heaven with their hands," she said. But heaven was never above, it was within. The stones they raise will not reach what they do not carry. Irad nodded slowly. Yet we cannot stop them. We are few, and they are many, and the sound of pride is louder than the whisper of remembrance. Then Elan, the youngest, lifted his eyes to the horizon where the tower rose like a wound upon the earth. "Let them build," he said quietly. "For even pride is a kind of prayer and a plea to be remembered." And Sapphira looked at him with sadness. "And when the tower falls?" He smiled faintly. "And then the wind will scatter the stones, and in their scattering they will listen again." So they waited. They tended their small fires. They sang to the stars in silence. They listened to the dust. And when the day came, when the tower cracked beneath its own echo and fell in a cloud of sound and stone, they wept not for ruin, but for return. For as the dust rose into the sky, it shimmered faintly, each particle catching the light of the sun like a tiny crystal, and the wind that swept through it carried a whisper. The covenant still breathes. The sons and daughters of the forgotten light knelt in the fields that day. They pressed their palms to the soil, and the soil trembled beneath their touch. They knew without word or proof that they were not alone. High above, the stars watched, shining not in judgment, but in memory. And somewhere, in the breath between heaven and earth, Enoch smiled. The fall of the great tower echoed through generations like a distant storm.
Long after the stones had settled and the dust had mingled once more with the breath of the earth, the sound of that collapse lingered, not in the air, but in the hearts of humankind.
It was the memory of reaching too high without remembering why. The people scattered across the lands, carrying with them fragments of the old tongue. Their words, once one, divided like rivers, flowing in many directions, carrying both wisdom and confusion. Yet within those rivers, faint glimmers of remembrance survived. A word here, a gesture there, a melody that echoed the hum of heaven's breath. The sons and daughters of the forgotten light followed these scattered people, walking unseen among them. They became healers, poets and keepers of dreams. Where pride had hardened men's hearts, they planted gentleness instead. Where fear had built walls, they whispered of breath. Irad, the shepherd, grew old wandering the hills. He spoke to those who would listen, saying, "We are not far from heaven. The distance is only the silence we build." He taught the children to listen for the voice in the wind, to hear the sacred tone beneath the chatter of the world. Sapphira wove her shimmering cloth in quiet villages, giving it freely to mothers and brides. When they asked how it caught the light so perfectly, she would smile and say, "It remembers where it came from." Her cloth became legend. Some said it was woven from moonlight itself, others from angels' hair. But she knew better. It was woven from patience, and Elan, ever the wanderer, moved between them both, teaching neither doctrine nor rule, only wonder. When you touch the earth, he would tell the weary, do not ask what it can give.
Ask what it remembers.
He carved no temples, left no scrolls. Yet his words travelled farther than his feet, for the winds still carried the echo of Enoch's vow, that remembrance would never vanish, only sleep. One night, as the moon rose red over the plains, the three of them met once more. Irad stooped with age, Sapphira's hair now streaked with silver, and Elan still young in spirit, though his eyes carried centuries. They gathered in a circle of ancient stones, the air between them humming with unseen light. The world forgets again, said Irad softly. Men turn their hearts to gold and their prayers to conquest. Sapphira's voice trembled like a thread between fingers. Perhaps forgetting is part of the rhythm. Perhaps remembrance must fade so it can be found again. Elan looked toward the horizon, where villages glowed faintly like scattered embers. And let us scatter too, he said. Let us become seeds, so that when the time is right, remembrance will bloom again in other forms. And so they did. When dawn came, the circle of stones was empty, save for 3 small lights that drifted upward into the sky. Each light carried a fragment of the covenant, a whisper of Enoch's breath. Irad's light became a star above the shepherd lands, soft, guiding, eternal. Its glow was said to guard those who walk the night alone. Sapphira's became a faint shimmer, woven into moonlight itself, a quiet blessing upon every birth and beginning. And Elan's descended into the heart of the earth, where it became a hidden ember, pulsing deep within the soil. It would wait there, patient, until the time came for light to rise again. The ages turned, empires rose and fell. Cities of marble grew where once there had been silence. Temples multiplied, each declaring the truth in their own tongue. But above them all, the stars kept their quiet vigil. They remembered the shepherd, the weaver, the wanderer, and through them they remembered Enoch. At times the stars grew brighter. Those were the nights when the world came close to remembering, when mothers sang to their children not from fear but love, when strangers offered food to the hungry, when forgiveness outweighed vengeance. In those moments heaven leaned nearer, listening. But memory is a flame, and flames flicker. There came dark ages too, when men forgot not only heaven but their own hearts. They carved idols in their own likeness and called them divine. They traded breath for power and light for certainty. The covenant dimmed, though it did not die, for deep beneath the noise the ember still pulsed. Elan's spark, the promise of renewal, waited in the heart of the earth, just beneath the reach of human greed. And when the world grew too heavy with forgetting, earthquakes would shake its crust, rivers would rise, winds would howl, not in wrath, but in remembrance. The earth itself would remind its children, you are of me. Then after one such storm, a child was born in a village by the sea. The midwives said the wind had paused when she took her first breath. Her eyes reflected starlight even before they had seen the sky. They named her Maera, meaning the remembered one. As she grew, she spoke little, but the air around her shimmered when she smiled. When she touched water, it sang. When she prayed, even the dust listened. She was not Enoch reborn, nor angel, nor miracle. She was simply a child whose soul had never forgotten where it came from. And when Maera turned 12, she began to wander. The old people said she was chasing the wind. The wise said the wind was chasing her. She spoke to the stars at night, calling them by names older than language. She found the circle of stones where the 3 lights had ascended long ago. Kneeling there, she felt the pulse of the earth beneath her hands. Faint, warm, steady.
I remember you, she whispered.
The ground trembled gently as if sighing in relief. The wind swirled around her, and the stars above aligned in a single thread of silver light. Somewhere, far beyond sight, the library of stars stirred again. The scroll of heaven unrolled one more line, not written by angels, but by a child remembering for the first time what the world had long forgotten. And so through Maera, the covenant spoke anew. Maera knelt in the circle of stones as dawn spilled across the horizon, washing the sky in quiet gold. The air trembled around her, though there was no wind. Only the pulse of the earth, the rhythm of something vast and ancient, breathing through her small frame. The dust beneath her palms glowed faintly, as if the soil itself remembered her touch. She was not afraid. The feeling within her was not power, but familiarity. Like waking from a long dream into a home she had never left.
Who am I?
She whispered to the silence, and the silence answered, not in sound but in warmth. It moved through her chest, rising into her breath. You are what remembers. The voice was not separate. It was the same that had once spoken to Enoch, to the winds, to the waters before their names. Its tone carried neither command nor mystery, only tenderness, the sound of knowing itself. She lifted her eyes. Above her, the stars had not faded with the morning. They lingered like sentinels of light, glimmering even against the brightening sky. She understood then that the stars were not far away. They were within, the reflections of something infinite folded inside her being. The circle of stones began to hum. Faint symbols shimmered across their surface, ancient sigils of unity. Circles within circles, spirals of breath and flame, the same markings that Enoch once saw in the covenant's renewal. Maera traced one with her fingers, and her touch awakened the air. The ground quivered softly. Light rose from the soil like mist. The pattern unfolded outward, lines of brightness connecting each stone until the entire plain shimmered like glass. The earth spoke again, this time in rhythm, a low vibration, steady as a heartbeat. The covenant breathes through you now. You are the memory walking. Tears filled her eyes, though she did not yet understand why. She felt neither chosen nor burdened, only woven, part of something vast, something tender. And as the sun lifted higher, her shadow stretched long behind her. Yet within that shadow shimmered faint starlight, as though the darkness itself had learned to glow. She rose to her feet. Then what must I do? The answer came softly, live. So she walked. For years she wandered the lands, moving from settlement to settlement, never staying long. Wherever she went, things grew easier, softer. Quarrels quieted, crops flourished, and the weary slept without nightmares. She asked for nothing. She blessed no one. She merely listened. When people asked her name, she would smile and say, I am the echo of a promise. Most would laugh kindly, thinking her mad, yet their laughter always sounded cleaner, freer afterward, like bells washed by rain. She found those who still dreamed of the stars, children who drew circles in the dirt, elders who spoke to rivers before crossing them, strangers who looked upward at night and felt homesick for something they could not name. She called them together. They came from mountains and valleys, from villages and deserts.
Farmers, shepherds, artists and outcasts.
The fire of remembrance flickered faintly in each of them, though none yet recognized it. Maera spoke to them not as a teacher, but as a mirror. You were never forgotten, she told them. The light sleeps in your breath. When you are kind, it stirs. When you forgive, it wakes. And when you love, truly without wanting, it shines. They listened in silence. Some wept, not from sorrow, but from recognition. Others smiled through tears, their hearts remembering what their minds could not. From that gathering came a quiet brotherhood, not of creed or temple, but of stillness. They called themselves the listeners, and their purpose was simple, to remind the world how to remember. They carried no scripture, wore no marks, swore no oaths. Instead, they tended gardens, healed strangers, taught the rhythm of breath. Wherever the noise of ambition grew too loud, they returned, gentle as wind, patient as dust. And through them, the sons and daughters of the forgotten light lived again. Centuries passed, and Maera grew older, though her eyes never dimmed.
Her hair silvered like
moonlight on water, her voice slowed like a hymn fading into twilight. But still, she walked, barefoot across the soil that once remembered Enoch. One night, as she slept beneath an olive tree, she dreamed of him. He stood before her as light and man, his face neither young nor old. The air around him shimmered like glass filled with sunrise. "Have I done what was asked?" she whispered. Enoch smiled, that same serene, knowing smile he had carried into eternity. "You have done what was never asked but always hoped. You have turned memory into mercy." She bowed her head, tears falling into the dust. "And what remains?" "The circle turns again," he said. "The breath you carry will pass to others. The world will forget and remember as it always has. But because of you, the forgetting will never be complete." He reached out and touched her forehead. "The covenant does not end my era. It changes names. It becomes new hearts." When she awoke, the tree above her was glowing faintly, its leaves shimmering as though dusted with stars. She felt lightness in her body, not weakness, but release. She rose at dawn and walked toward the sea. There, at the edge of the world, where the horizon blurred into heaven, she stopped. The tide was calm, the sky pale and endless. She looked upward and whispered, "I remember." And the wind, soft as breath, answered, "And we remember you." She stepped into the waves. The water welcomed her, glowing faintly around her feet. With each step she took, her form dissolved further. First into light, then into sound, then into silence. When the last ripple faded, there was only stillness. And then, from the horizon, a shimmer rose into the sky, a thread of silver weaving upward until it joined the stars. Far above, in the library of stars, a new constellation was born, not of fire, but of peace. It glowed softly, shaped like an open hand, its palm filled with tiny points of light that pulsed like breath. And from that constellation came a single whisper that crossed heaven and earth alike. "What was forgotten will be remembered again." The circle endured, the covenant breathed. And in every newborn child who dreamed of light, a fragment of Mara's voice and Enoch's still lingered, calling softly through the silence of their sleep. Before the first thunder, before the breaking of worlds, there was silence. And in that silence the divine listened to itself. It is said that silence is not the absence of sound, but the breath that holds it, the cradle from which both word and creation rise. Yet, as the ages passed, and the children of dust filled the world with names, that silence grew thin, stretched, strained, forgotten beneath the weight of prayer and command. For men had learned to speak to heaven, but few still remembered how to listen for its answer. The gods, the angels, the emanations of the One, began to fade from the edge of hearing. Their voices, once like wind across golden fields, were now echoes trapped behind centuries of noise. The stars still carried their songs, but even the stars began to tire of speaking into an unhearing world. And so for the first time since the beginning, heaven fell quiet. Enoch, who had become more breath than being, felt that silence tremble through eternity. He wandered through the library of stars and found the music dimmed. The constellations that once pulsed like living scripture now flickered faintly, their rhythm uneven. Even the great spiral, the heartbeat of creation, slowed as though waiting for something that refused to come. He stood before the source and whispered, "Have you turned away?" And from the stillness came no reply, only the sound of his own remembrance returning to him. He listened harder. Beneath that silence, faint and buried deep, he felt it. Not absence, but exhaustion.
A stillness not of neglect, but of mourning.
The divine had not turned away from creation. Creation had turned away from itself. He looked downward through veils of light and distance upon the earth. He saw temples built in his name and names he did not recognize. He saw prayers shouted louder than understanding, sacrifices made to shadows of memory. He saw gods made by human hands and men remade in the image of their inventions. The silence between gods had not begun in heaven. It had begun in man. Enoch descended again, not as form, but as thought carried by the wind. His presence fell like dew upon the hearts of dreamers, those few still quiet enough to feel. In the minds of poets and hermits, in the breath of sleepers and the sighs of mothers, he whispered the same question. Can you still hear the silence? Many mistook it for longing. Some mistook it for madness.
A sacred few wept, for they understood that silence was not emptiness, but the place where the divine waits to be remembered.
He found one such listener in a mountain cave, a young man named Uri, fasting in solitude. Uri was thin and pale, his eyes deep wells of yearning. When Enoch's presence entered the cave, the lamp beside the man flickered, though no wind had passed.
"Who are you?"
Uri asked softly. I am the breath that listens, said Enoch. The silence between the words you pray. Uri trembled. Then speak if heaven still speaks through you. But Enoch shook his head unseen. No, child.
I have not come to speak. I have come to listen with you.
The gods are not gone. They are waiting. They rest in the stillness your world has abandoned. Uri bowed his head. And how shall I hear them again? By becoming as they are, whispered Enoch. Still, patient, without demand. And so Uri sat in silence for 7 nights. He ate nothing, spoke nothing, sought nothing. He let his breath slow until even his heartbeat sounded like the echo of distant thunder. And on the 7th dawn, he felt it. A warmth that was not of flesh, a presence that filled him without touching him. He wept for he heard nothing, yet understood everything. The silence had spoken. When he left the cave, his face glowed faintly in the dawn light. His village called him a prophet, but he denied the name. I have no prophecy, he told them, only stillness. Yet wherever he went, the air grew softer. Quarrels faded. Fields grew fertile. The sick found rest. For the silence he carried reminded creation of its first breath. Enoch watched and wept with quiet joy. The covenant breathes still, he said. Even silence remembers the word that birthed it. But as he turned his gaze once more to the heavens, he saw something stirring beyond the stillness. A darkness forming at the edges of remembrance.
Not evil, not wrath, but hunger. A void born of longing too long unspoken.
The divine silence, left unanswered, had begun to ache for its reflection. The gods themselves, those ancient lights of will and wonder, had grown lonely. They whispered among themselves in tones even Enoch could barely hear. Do they still remember us? Do they still call our names? Are we fading? Enoch's heart trembled. He knew that if heaven began to doubt its own memory, creation would fracture again. He turned to the source, that great heart of stillness, and said softly, Let me go once more into the silence, before forgetting becomes forever. The light within the source pulsed, once, slow and sorrowful. And so Enoch descended again, not as word, nor as light, but as silence itself. He became the pause between breaths, the stillness before dawn, the moment of awe before tears. And through that silence he began to teach the world once more how to listen. He descended not in fire, nor in cloud, nor in wind, but in stillness so profound that even the dust held its breath. There was no sound, no shimmer of light to mark his arrival. The world did not see him come because he came not to the world, but through it. He became the hush that falls before a child's first cry, the calm between 2 waves, the breath drawn by a mother before she forgives. And as he entered the folds of creation, the world began, faintly, almost imperceptibly, to listen again. Across the hills and cities, hearts slowed. Words grew softer. Temples once filled with shouting priests fell quiet, their torches flickering in wonder as the air thickened with a presence they could not name. Even the wild beasts paused in their hunger, sensing the return of a forgotten rhythm. For this silence was not void, it was remembrance. It was the voice of God resting within its own creation, waiting to be heard. Enoch moved unseen through the lives of men. He stood beside kings who trembled in their gilded solitude, whispering peace without words. He lingered near the dying, letting them feel that death was not end but return. He brushed the dreams of the lonely, breathing calm into their sleep. And slowly, like dawn touching the edges of night, humanity began to remember what no language could hold. They began to feel again that the divine was not above, nor beyond but between, in the spaces where one hand reached for another, in the breath shared between laughter and tears, in the silence between words where meaning dwells unseen. It began in small moments. A father, weary from toil, laid down his anger before entering his home. A woman stopped her weeping long enough to listen to the wind and found comfort in its soundless song. A child, sitting beside a sleeping dog, felt for the first time the weight of peace.
Each act, small and unremarkable, was a doorway, and through it the silence entered, filling the world again with stillness that healed.
But even as the silence spread, the heavens shuddered, for not all could bear to remember. In the higher realms the angels watched and trembled. They had sung for aeons, their voices weaving light into law, their hymns keeping the order of creation alive. But now the song faltered. Not from disobedience, but from awe. They saw their father's silence descend into the world, and for the first time they did not know whether to sing or to listen. Some could not bear the quiet. They fled to the edges of heaven, their wings burning with the ache of unused song. Others wept, for they realized that in all their glory they had forgotten how to be still. Among them rose one, an archangel of radiant sorrow named Keziel, whose voice had once guided the dawn. She watched the quiet spread through creation and whispered, "If heaven falls silent, what purpose remains for song?" And the source, that deep, unseen light, answered her with a whisper that moved through every star. To remember why it began. Keziel bowed her head. She looked down upon the earth and saw Enoch walking among mortals in the guise of calm, carrying silence as one carries a flame. She felt both reverence and longing. The pain of knowing she could not follow him fully. For angels are woven of sound, not stillness, but she could echo him. And so she began to weave silence into her song. Her voice, once bright as crystal, softened into a tone that carried space within it, a note of rest. She taught the other angels to sing not to be heard, but to listen through their singing. And thus, even heaven began to remember how to breathe again. The stars pulsed slower, gentler. The spiral of light at the center of creation brightened. The silence between gods was no longer emptiness. It became communion. Below, on earth, those attuned to the divine rhythm began to feel the change. They awoke from dreams in which they heard music so soft it felt like warmth. Their hearts beat in strange synchrony with the tides and the stars. Lovers who kissed felt the pulse of eternity between them. Even the birds sang differently, leaving pauses in their songs as though revering something unseen. And when night fell, the wind carried whispers through the valleys. The gods have not left. They are listening. Enoch stood upon a mountain peak beneath a sky heavy with light. The constellations above seemed nearer now, their glow more intimate. He lifted his face and said, "You hear them again, do you not?" From the deep silence came a single voice. Not thunder, not word, but a resonance that filled everything. "We hear because you listened first." Enoch bowed his head. "Then the circle is whole again. The voice pulsed gently, like the sigh of the universe exhaling. "Not whole," it said, breathing. And Enoch smiled, for he understood. Perfection was not stillness without flaw, but motion without fear. The endless inhale and exhale of remembering and forgetting, of sound and silence, of gods and men listening to one another through love. The night deepened. The stars flickered like countless eyes closing in rest. The world, for the first time in ages, slept without the weight of noise. And in that stillness, heaven and earth shared a single sacred breath. There comes a moment, after every silence, when the breath turns once more towards speech, when the voice of creation opens its eyes and remembers its name. And so it was, after the long stillness between gods, that the world began to hum again. Not with noise nor with clamour, but with harmony. A low, living sound that rose from rivers, roots, and the hearts of all who remembered. Enoch stood between the heavens and the earth, watching light flow through the veins of the cosmos like blood returning to a sleeping body. The great spiral turned once more, and every star shimmered with awareness. The library of stars sang softly, like a choir awakening in gentle awe. And the word, the first breath that had birthed creation, stirred again. It was not loud. It was not command. It was recognition. The sound passed through Enoch and into the world below, and where it touched, things began to awaken. Oceans exhaled mist that glowed with memory. Mountains rang like low bells struck by unseen hands. The soil itself shivered in delight, its every grain alive with remembrance. The covenant of crystal and dust rose once more, not as a promise, but as realization. Heaven did not hover above the world.
Heaven was the world, breathing through its countless faces. And in that great remembering, the divine spoke again, though not as it once had. It did not thunder.
It whispered through everything at once, "My name is in you." The stars flared. The oceans paused mid-tide. Every living thing felt the words as warmth, as pulse, as peace. Enoch knelt, trembling, for he too had forgotten that truth, that the voice he had sought beyond all worlds had always been the one moving through him. He whispered back, "Then we were never apart," and the light around him deepened, tender as dawn. The voice answered, "You were my remembering, as I was yours. You listened long enough for silence to speak, and now what was divided breathes again as one." He looked downward, through clouds of gold and violet, upon the earth that gleamed like a newborn jewel. He saw humanity stirring, not yet awakened, but dreaming truer dreams. Their temples were changing shape. Their prayers grew slower, quieter. Their wars, though not ended, trembled under the weight of conscience. The seeds of stillness had taken root.
And he knew the covenant had worked.
But there remained one final act. The breath that began as Enoch's must now return to all. He turned toward the source, the great heart of light, and said softly, "Then let me fade, that they may rise." The voice replied, "You cannot fade. You are the breath within their breath, but you may rest." He bowed, his form of light bowing not as one who leaves, but as one who dissolves into meaning. And with that gesture, his being began to unfold. From his heart poured light, not the burning kind, but soft, clear, living light that knew every shadow by name. It streamed outward, dividing into countless rivers of gold that flowed through heaven and earth alike. Each current carried a memory, a tenderness, a fragment of the word renewed. The rivers fell upon the world as rain, and where the rain touched, hearts opened. Children looked at the sky and felt kinship. The old looked at the soil and felt peace. The weary looked at one another and saw home. And though none knew his name, they spoke it in every act of mercy, in every breath drawn in wonder. For the name of Enoch had never been his alone. It was the sound of creation remembering itself. Then the heavens dimmed, not darkened, but gentled, like eyes closing in contentment. The stars whispered to one another in languages older than time, passing the story of the listener through eternity. He did not ascend. He became. And so the last gate closed, not as a barrier, but as completion. The library of stars folded upon itself, each constellation returning to its root word. The angels, once bound to song, now sang softly within silence, each note a prayer of still listening. Even the voice of God grew quiet again, not from distance, but from trust. For when all things remember, there is no need to speak. On the earth, centuries later, a child would find a crystal in the dust, clear as air, warm as heart. When held to the sun, it would shimmer faintly with 7 lights. The elders would say it was a gift from the sky, a relic of forgotten ages. But the child gazing into it would hear faintly, not words, but breath, a sound that was not sound. And in that moment, the circle would begin again. For remembrance has no end, only rhythm. It sleeps, it wakes, it speaks, it rests, like the tides of divine love breathing through eternity, and the whisper that began before the flood, before the fall, before even light itself, would continue. Soft, endless, certain. All that forgets will remember. All that falls will rise. For I am in the dust and the crystal, the breath and the flame, the silence and the song.
I am the name that has no need to be spoken, for I am already heard.
The wind stilled. The world exhaled, and heaven in one final breath answered back. Agla. Atha. Gibor Leolam Adonai, thou art mighty forever, O Lord. The stars pulsed once and were still. The covenant slept in peace. The circle was whole. The listener rested at last.